across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Very good evening. This is the Evening Exchange. I'm Peter Cardwell. Thanks for your company. Loads to talk about between now and 10 o'clock, especially as a Russian warship has fired shots at a yacht in the Channel. We'll be talking to the former Armed Services Minister, Al Cairns, who gave an excoriating resignation speech in the House of Commons today. His first interview since that is in a couple of minutes' time. We'll also be talking about the rape gangs inquiry that Rupert Lowe and various other MPs have taken part in, with some very shocking findings, and the baby Preston Davey, 8 missed opportunities to save him. What on earth went wrong and why? 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. You can text me 87222 with the word talk in your text. You can tweet me at talkTV, follow me at Peter Cardwell. You can send me a WhatsApp text message, a WhatsApp voice message, or give me a ring, all on the main number 0344 499 1000. So much to talk about between now and 10 o'clock, so stay with me here on Talk. Well, with all this talk about defence funding, how we defend the nation, how we make sure we are safe here at home and abroad, there has been a very worrying development about a British-flagged vessel reporting an incident involving a warning volley from a ship that had escorted shadow tankers. This is a Russian ship firing warning shots at a British yacht in the English Channel. Well, for reaction for this, we're joined by Al Cairns MP. He was, until last week, the Armed Services Minister, Defence Minister, who joins us now. Al, thank you for your company this evening. What do you make of what has happened here?
Well, I think this is a very serious incident. You have one of the busiest shipping channels in the world. You have foggy conditions. You have a major Russian warship, a frigate, the Admiral Gregorevich, and you have the firing of probably heavy caliber rounds across the bow of a British yacht. And I always say that conflicts often start through miscalculations or mistakes. And we just underscores the requirement to make sure our defence is funded and we're ready to go. What I would say is I know Dan Jarvis, the new Secretary of State for Defence, is exceptionally capable, huge military pedigree, and him as his team will be looking at this very, very closely to make sure that, one, it doesn't happen again, and two, it's carefully calculated into future plans. You mentioned Dan Jarvis there, the new Defence Secretary. You say he's a good man, but does he have enough money to do the job? Well, I've been really clear, and I've said this, and this is one of the reasons why I resigned, that I think we need to hit 3% by 2030. And so I would say you need more money, but I've also been really honest that we've got to spend that money on the right things, and we need to start thinking about defence, not just about warships, but we need to, or planes or bullets or bombs. We need to start thinking about national resilience as a whole. And this just again underscores the heightened tensions we have. We have war in Europe. You've on your programme earlier, you had the Middle East crisis and the peace deal, which will require military capability. And all of these combined, we have reports of Russian links in some way, shape or form to those attacks on Keir Starmer's house. Combine that with misinformation, cyber attacks ongoing. This is a whole of society problem, and we need to deal with it as such. You talked about total security in lots of different ways in your speech today. I watched the whole thing. You talked about it being different parts of the same challenge. Could you perhaps expand on that theme a little bit? Yeah, so the ultimate end state of our country is to ensure that we can prosper, that we are secure and safe, whether it be the citizen or the country as a whole. And therefore, my perspective is that each government department has a role to play in that, to ensure that we are safe and secure. That could be anything from cadets on one side of the house, all the way through to our foreign policy, which directly affects the price of gas that comes through your kitchen hobs, all the way through to our industrial policy that must be able to deliver the capabilities for defence, but also directly has implications for your child's future. And I think you need to be all wound together into a strategy to deliver a comprehensive approach for the next 3 to 4 years, where the rest of Europe has said by 2030 it's very likely that we will be tested in some way, shape or form. I just want to play a short extract from something I'm particularly interested in as someone from Northern Ireland and someone who worked at the Northern Ireland office as a special advisor. This is the Northern Ireland Veterans Bill. You talked about this in your speech today. Let's have a look at what you said. And thirdly, I left because I could no longer ignore the continued failure to address the treatment of our veterans in Northern Ireland. Yeah. It's a difficult issue, and I cannot describe how difficult this fight has been. Whatever the view people have of the Troubles, a country owes a duty to those it sent into harm's way under lawful orders. That duty does not end when that uniform comes off. The Labour movement was built on a simple idea, that the people who do the hard work this country asks of them deserves the backing of the state in return. Too many veterans have carried uncertainty for too long, while others have benefited from political accommodations that were never available to those who served, and I could not reconcile that with my own understanding of duty.
I read your resignation letter, Al, and I don't think I've ever read a resignation letter that is as strong and as excoriating as it. The speech wasn't far behind, but you defended this policy in public for a significant period of time when people strongly suspected that it wasn't what you were saying. Why did you not feel that you could be open about it? Obviously, collective responsibility is an important thing, and I suppose you wanted to work behind the scenes to fix it, but presumably there were a lot of people who were quite disappointed in your public stance for quite a serious amount of time on that.
Yeah, so first of all, let's point to my public stance on defending the bill recently. There isn't one. To start with, I defended bits of the bill because I got 6 protections into the bill, but it became very clear to me as we looked into the detail of the legislation that was being proposed that it never went far enough. Now, I'm a big fan of fighting within the tent for change, for regressive change to come to a solution. Your voice is sometimes stronger in government. I got to a position probably about a month and maybe 2 months ago where I found that my voice was no longer being listened to, and I didn't think I could deliver the change. And as such, it's one of the reasons why I resigned, because I need to be really honest with both myself and the veterans. And if I've lost trust in the system to deliver that legislation, how could I honestly look veterans in the face and ask them to trust it? Now, all is not lost, because there is room for manoeuvre here. And I think there is a solution where we can create one body that gets to truth, reconciliation and justice. And there is an avenue to work through this. What we need to do is take into account the voices of veterans and ensure that, I always say, tactics before strategy is the noise before defeat. And we must ensure that our moral and ethical code is in the right direction. And secondly, that we're not playing into the hands of those that would seek Northern Ireland to pull away from the United Kingdom or indeed anything else.
And you mentioned that in your speech as well. So on the 29th of April, when you didn't vote in that, when you were absent from Parliament, that wasn't a coincidence?
So I went to visit our RAF regiment, who were in part of the Middle East, that were in the very mix of the fight. And I deployed out there to go and see them, and then went on a broader Middle East trip to meet our allies and partners, and particularly talking about the preparations for what may come after a Middle East peace deal. And hey, I got a lot of abuse for not turning up to the vote. But you will know as well as I know, if you're a government minister, you often have to vote with the government as well. And if you don't, you have to resign. And if you have to resign, you can't then fight for that bill within government. The reality is I was already travelling by the time the decision for the paper orders came out.
Okay.
But the reality is I always talk about strategy. I could have resigned months ago on this issue, but it would have reduced my ability to fight for the progressive change that I think we've achieved. I now need a little bit more out of the government before I'm willing to back the bill as it moves forward. You
stopped being listened to, you said, a month or two ago. Who stopped listening to you? John Healey? Keir Starmer? Rachel Reid?
Remember, this isn't a defence bill. This is a Northern Ireland office bill.
Hilary Benn? He stopped listening to you?
The system stopped listening. And so I wanted...
The system is people. Which people stopped listening to you?
I'm not going to talk to you about the machinations inside government. I think there are some privileges that are required inside the system. What I can say to you is I became increasingly frustrated with the inability to change this bill for the better. I also didn't like, in some cases, how we were trading bits of the bill on what I would call veterans. And I really wanted to see some quite simple changes to the bill that made it fit for purpose. And I actually don't think we're far away from that, but we've created a hierarchy of truth. You have legacy inquests and inquiries ongoing, and then you have a centralized legacy commission. Why have we created 2 bodies to get to truth, reconciliation and justice? Because if I'm a victim of either the British forces or indeed a victim of a terrorist action, I always want an inquest or an inquiry. which undermines your legacy commission. Do what South Africa did. Create one legacy commission that gets to truth, reconciliation, justice, and if they find wrongdoing, then absolutely move it to an inquest or an inquiry. Don't do it the other way around.
Okay, what happens in the next few weeks? Because there are a lot of what ifs, aren't there? What if Andy Burnham wins in Makerfield on Thursday? What if there's a Labour leadership contest? If there is one, will you join it?
Well, I've been really clear. I want a policy debate. So we've got one shot to get this right as we run into 3 years into a general election. And I want to see a clear and concise policy debate that talks about how we're going to close with the problems this country has, have the courageous and honest discussion with the population, and then move out on one foot, all in synchronization, and make that change. And if we are not courageous and bold, we risk falling into the trap of a Reform Conservative government in 29 and Scottish independence by 31. And we won't be dealing with borders and budgets and economies. We'll be dealing with the breakup of this kingdom. And I think it is completely and utterly reckless not to be as bold and courageous as we can be. Well,
I'm delighted to hear a Labour MP talk and be very clear that he's a unionist, because that often isn't the case. And I'm delighted to hear that. Not just
Dan, I fought for this country. I didn't fight for any part of it. I'm a proud Scotsman, but I didn't fight for Scotland, England, Wales or Northern Ireland. I fought for the United Kingdom, and I will continue to do.
You're a proud unionist when it comes to Scotland, and you're a proud unionist when it comes to Northern Ireland?
I am absolutely.
Excellent, glad to hear it. Not often you hear that, particularly from Labour. You talk about, I've been very clear, but you kind of haven't been clear, because you didn't answer my question whether you would join a leadership debate. If you want a policy debate, surely a megaphone within that is to attempt to become leader of the Labour Party. You talked about being brave and courageous. Surely if you've been an MP just for 2 years but have this huge public profile, surely brave and courageous would be, as you have been many, many times in the military aspect, a little tiny bit in politics would be to attempt to become leader of the Labour Party.
So Dan, hey, huge credit to you to try and force this. The reality is every decision is based on a multitude of different factors, and I don't feel those factors have been met yet before I make a decision. I'm a pretty calculated guy. I know how to plan. I know strategy.
But you're mulling it over.
And my, I'm mulling, but actually you've got to meet a certain amount of decisions before it will trigger quite a major decision from myself. And but the base common denominator is this country deserves a policy debate, an honest one, of how we are going to move forward. And if we don't have that, we risk bumbling along.
Should Keir Starmer and Rachel Reeves have any role in a future government if there is change?
Do not underestimate from my perspective, and the public perception may be something else, but do not underestimate the hard work that is going on in government every day against significant headwinds. These are good people trying their very best. And I know the country, the political class is not liked, across society at the moment, but I cannot describe to you how hard they are fighting to try and do the best. And we are facing broader geopolitical headwinds that we probably haven't faced in a long time. We just had a Russian ship off the south coast of Dorset firing rounds across an English channel, 15 billion worth of cyber attacks, Middle East war. In Ukraine, there's 1.5 million Russian casualties, which is affecting the markets all over the world, and so on and so on.
Just a final question, Al, when it comes to Labour, you talk about them doing their best and working very hard. When it comes to Keir Starmer and Rachel Reeves and others, in your view, what do you think has actually been achieved by this Labour government in the last 2 years?
So I think there's a huge amount. Remember, I'm a firm believer that, Labour was chiselled out of the mines, it was hammered in the shipyards across, Govan, Liverpool, Belfast, and it was forged in the factories in the Industrial Revolution. The reality is the Workers' Rights Bill, the Renters' Rights Act, and then moving into the two-child benefit cap, which gets a lot of scrutiny, but in the reality it lifts 450,000 children out of poverty. And I think having a country in this day and age as child poverty to the extent of which it does is an utter disgrace. And I see it in Birmingham every day I have a surgery.
Al Carnes, thank you for joining us. Appreciate that. He's the Labour MP, former Armed Forces Minister. Thanks for joining us on the programme this evening. And Richard in Ayrshire has been in touch and says Putin is laughing because he watched Starmer give all our money and weapons to Zelensky and left us wide open to anything. Chris in Derbyshire says while Russia fires shots at civilian vessels, we're debating banning social media among kids who are clever enough to access it if they want, and I would argue are more tech savvy than this government. Just what silly games are we playing, says Chris in Derbyshire. And Becca says I'm surprised Al Carnes isn't playing golf, a man of integrity that could vote vote against the persecution of his fellow veterans. Well, maybe he will as time goes on. He says that he needs many more safeguards and many more reassurances if he is to vote for the bill, which he didn't because he was in the Middle East as Armed Forces Minister in something was, I'm sure, a very important trip, but nonetheless a happy coincidence for the whips in Labour. Lots to discuss on all of this. Just before we go to the break, let's get a voice note from Richard on what Al Carnes has been saying there.
Why the hell is Al Carnes in Labour? I mean, he's a very educated, decent human being, you know? The Labour Party also, with a legacy bill, want to stop prosecuting veterans for so-called past crimes. He just seems to be so sensible-minded and common sense. He's in a party that's going to lose a general election anyway. He's going to lose his job. And he's actually, he looks and sounds like he's a very good MP. I'm just baffled. I'm just baffled by it.
Thank you, Richard. A final one from Alison, who says Carnes did not have the balls to vote against the persecution of the veterans, so he backed his party to keep his job. He is just as bad as the rest, won't stand on his own principles. His words mean nothing, says Alison. Do you agree with that? What do you think of what Al Carnes said there? Whatever your view, however you want to express it, 0344 499 1000 is the number. You can also text me, 87222, with the word talk in your text. We'll go to the debate desk next. Sebastian Salek and Claire Muldoon will be with us. Let us know your thoughts on everything they're talking about, and we'll get your views certainly piped into that as well. Plenty to discuss. Stay with us here on Talk.
I'm genuinely disgusted when people continue to point out failure after failure after failure and do not provide balanced analysis of the deliverable of services like the police. What I don't see from reform is them standing next to some of these people that they continually criticise and saying, actually, they've made a mistake here. There is a requirement for a review and we must get through it. But I'd also like to thank the police for doing an excellent job at stopping the riots, doing this, breaking this criminal gang, doing the hard work they do day in, day out. And I think we take it for granted.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Thank you so much to everybody who has been in touch. H says Al Carnes for the new 007 was the remark there. Whatever you think, do give us a shout, and plenty of time for phone calls between now and 10 o'clock, so please do give me a ring. 0344 499 1000. Whatever is on the tip of your tongue, I want to talk to you. Tanya says, I cannot believe Al Carnes did not mention free breakfast clubs as one of Labour's greatest achievements. Well, I know what you mean, Tanya. They do mention that all the time, and good for him for actually not mentioning it, because it does strike me as a not a terrible thing. I don't want children to be hungry, obviously, but I don't think if that's your one achievement in 2 years, as many people do talk about, including Keir Starmer, I think we're in trouble. Let's talk a little bit on the debate desk now with Claire Muldoon, the broadcaster and commentator. Lovely to see you.
And you too.
Sebastian Salek, former Labour councillor and commentator. Lovely to see you.
Good to see you.
Tell me your thoughts, first of all, on this Russian warship that fired warning shots at a yacht in the Channel. This is pretty worrying stuff, and the Coast Guard received reports this morning from a British flagged civilian vessel sailing near the Admiral Grigorovich, which is a Russian frigate. Claire?
Well, Do you remember a few months ago that Starmer had said that there was a real threat to Russian infiltration in our seas, and that Putin's response was that he was going to sail ships in under flags that weren't Russian? This is what this is.
Yeah.
And then on the back of, it's almost as if it's a targeted attack from the conviction yesterday of the 2 Ukrainians that's proven links with Russia to infiltrate parts of our government. Gosh, we've had China and we've now had Russia try to infiltrate part of, what's going on in the country. Is anything safe? And, they waited till Starmer was over in France for the G7. We've got the NATO alliance talks coming up between the 7th and the 9th, or the 7th and the 8th of July. Plus, we've got the World Cup. Is there any more flags involved in the news? That's what I want to know.
Well, it's very interesting that Martin Kelly, he's head of advisory at crisis management firm EOS Risk, he says let's be careful not to link a Russian warship firing a warning shot at the yacht with a Russian tanker being seized by the UK, which is very interesting. Sailors on the Russian warship firing the warning shot on Tuesday, 3 days after the Royal Marine Commandos and officers from the National Crime Agency boarded the sanctioned Russian Shadow Fleet tanker Smirthos in the Channel. Martin Kelly has told the Press Association, warships, it doesn't matter who you are or where you're from, are entitled to self-defence. If a ship, yacht, etc. is approaching, the rules of force escalation will start with a very high-frequency radio warning, and if there is no response, the next escalation is a more intense warning, then up to warning shots, which is where we got to here. This kind of thing does happen everywhere all the time. I honestly don't think there's a link there. If Russia was going to respond, then they would do probably against a commercial ship. We also saw the incredibly serious conviction, certainly, of what had happened to Keir Starmer's house. That is, his sister-in-law was living there, and children in the house. That was firebombed by people apparently linked to Russia. This is a really, really serious incident and a dreadful thing for that family to go through. And Keir Starmer, of course, nowhere near it, but he had sublet the house to someone else. Clearly, there is danger from Russia here, Sebastian.
There is, and it shows how multifaceted Russia's attack can be. You can have boots on the ground walking into Ukraine.
And coordinated.
And coordinated. But you can also have these attacks, and it's slightly reminiscent of the Salisbury Cathedral incident, where they're coming and they're being interviewed, and they're with a little wink, they're saying, oh, it wasn't us, we were just there to see the cathedral.
123 feet high or whatever it was.
Exactly, I think that every time I'm there.
Yeah, 123 meters must be.
Yes, it's a tall spire.
Yes.
But they're essentially saying, we know what we're doing, we're in control here, you can't catch us out. And it feels similar here, because the broader question I would ask is, what is a Russian warship doing off the British coast anyway? It seems inappropriate that it should be there.
It's cat and mouse. I mean, that is Putin's game book, playbook, every day. This is what it is, all day long. And I bet we've got a myriad of maritime expertise in maritime law now coming up to give their tuppence worth and say what's going on. But, there's so much to unpack here. And if Michael Kelly is saying, well, it happens all the time, then I'm more inclined to agree. And feel, a certain amount of safety and security of that.
From what you've read about the alleged orchestration by Russia of the firebombing attack, what do you think, Claire?
I think it's absolutely appalling that 2 young men got so close to have the intelligence to find out a sublet property that is owned by the Prime Minister of Great Britain, and they were therefore able to target not only the house that was habited by a female and her 2 children, I believe, and a car. I mean, come on, is nothing safe? Where is the intelligence coming from?
But it talks about the state of the open society we live in. We all live on houses that give out onto roads, and we're not in compounds like you might be in the US or South Africa.
Some people are, but most aren't. Most homes are straight out there.
And this is a man who was the leader of the opposition for 5 odd years living in that house, and then the Prime Minister letting it out. So it's not hard to get this information. And it's just the nature of our society that makes these things very easy. On
the 10-year anniversary of Joe Cox's death as well, though, and subsequent death and murder of David Amos.
Yes.
Is nothing sacred anymore. Is no one safe.
And we need to be really careful. And it is interesting.
We have to be.
There are lots of people in society who don't feel safe. There are lots of people who are targets and have been targeted. We've seen that with celebrities like Matt Lucas and various others as well, who've been, just people shouting at them, and Helen Mirren recently, and not physically attacking them, but I'm sure very unsettling as well. I just wonder, from I mean, the Prime Minister is one of the most protected people in the country, but there are lots of people who aren't. I mean, do you feel safe in this country largely, Sebastian?
I do, yeah. I've had the odd death threat, as I think we probably all have through this line of work, which is a little bit unsettling when that happens, isn't it?
Yeah.
But broadly, I do feel safe. Yeah, and look, it's worth remembering that the Prime Minister's residence, even, you know, not so long ago, was not didn't have a big gate going up to it.
Yeah,
it was quite
1989.
easy.
Yeah,
well, there we go.
Right. Yeah.
Quite easy to walk up to the front door of the most powerful person in the country. And I kind of want to keep it that way. It's sad when we have to sacrifice our liberty because of those who aim to harm us.
And one of the great things about, it was in 1991 after the IRA attack on when John Major was Prime Minister, apologies to get that wrong. You're absolutely right. We do want our politicians to be accessible, and the more risk to them, the less accessible they become. There's one MP I know who never advertises where she is, for example. She will simply say there will be a surgery, for example, on a Friday somewhere in this area, and when you make an appointment you can come, but you can't just kind of walk in. And it's weird because they live this very strange life between even ordinary MPs. They live in, you know, they work in one of the most protected buildings in the country, the Palace of Westminster, but then when they're out and about in their surgeries, they can just be at a fete or, you know, in the constituency or in a village hall or whatever.
Michael Gove nearly get knocked over by a bike the other day.
That's right,
you know?
Exactly. No, it's very, very worrying. Thank you to Becky, who says, thank you for securing Al Carnes' first interview since his resignation speech. Well, that wasn't me, that was James, our producer, so well done to
James.
him. It fully backed up my views of that, whatever he is plotting in the background, be it a leadership attempt or a deal with Burnham, if he wins in Makerfield, that his views will lead to absolutely no change or sort out the issues this country has. He said absolutely nothing in that interview except to completely ignore the issues that many of the people of this country have. So if we need any more reason to make sure that Labour are pushed out of government as soon as possible, then that interview was it. His views lead to more spending and less looking after the silent majority in this country who have had enough. Thank you, Al Carnes. You've just done the opposition the world of good. You're just Starmer and Burnham in another disguise. Becky, I'm not sure I agree with that, to be brutally honest. Claire?
I'm with you, actually. I don't necessarily agree with you there, Becky. I'm actually very impressed with Al Carnes.
He resigned for, you know, basically on principle, on principled reasons. So I just don't agree with you on that. But there we are. Another person, Becca, says, "Come on, Claire. Don't let me down with Sebastian. I literally called for this pair to be on together." Well, here they are. And we will see, no doubt the debate will rage as time goes on. We will take a break now, but we're going to talk in just a second about Rupert Lowe and his rape gangs inquiry, which is out today, the findings of that. We'll talk to someone who was heavily involved with that a little bit later on. This is an additional inquiry. It wasn't just Restore Britain that was involved. There are various other MPs, Nick Timothy, for example, the Shadow Justice Secretary, Carla Lockhart from the DUP, and many victims and advocates who have given evidence to it. So we'll talk about that rape gang inquiry in just a second on the debate desk with Sebastian and Claire. You, of course, can get your call in as well and get your voice on the air, 0344 499 1000. Stay with us.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Well, let's talk now about this rape gang inquiry that has been published. Rupert Lowe raised £600,000 from a crowdfunder and put together a very comprehensive inquiry, actually. The evidence found how in the inquiry's view, police discouraged victims, destroyed evidence, and in some cases were active members of networks when it came to rape gangs. Social care placed children into homes that became hubs for traffickers. The NHS failed to act on obvious signs of sexual abuse and even sent children back to their abusers. Schools ignored clear safeguarding concerns and instead punished and excluded victims. We have found, the press release says, evidence that the same unspeakable crimes occurred in at least 149 local authority districts, close to 40% of all such districts across the United Kingdom. Rupert Lowe has put out a little video about this. Let's have a bit of a look at some of it now.
We're also intent on naming those people in Parliament, where we're not going to prejudice a legal case, so that everybody knows those people who are responsible, who should have dealt with this but failed to deal with it. So it's been a long, hard, arduous 16 months, and I want to thank everybody, and I hope that every member of the British public has the time to read this. It's not straightforward. It will take time, but it needs to be understood and it needs to be dealt with, and dealt with now.
Just to say, in a few minutes' time, we will be speaking to Marlon West, who's the father of a rape gang abuse victim who's involved in this inquiry. I have read as much of the findings as I have had time to do today. It really is pretty shocking, and the inquiry says their view is that a new Childhood Sexual Exploitation Act must be passed, creating for the first time a specific criminal offence of organised group-based child sexual exploitation with mandatory minimum sentences. Sebastian, what did you make of this?
I don't understand why this is happening. I think initially it was politically a good piece of communications, because the
inquiry itself.
This inquiry, because the government was dragging its heels on an inquiry, which it shouldn't have done. That was a mistake. Eventually it relented and there was an inquiry. Good decision, statutory inquiry. It has the powers to change the law, to compel people to do things. This is non-statutory, and so it's a communications exercise. And after that...
It's more than that, surely.
Well,
you're hearing a lot of information, a lot of evidence from people. It's happening a lot faster than heels are still being dragged on that statutory inquiry, and there is a lack of confidence in statutory inquiries for many people who say, lessons will be learned. People are still waiting for compensation on infected blood, for example.
Sure. But look, if an inquiry is not statutory, what is the point of it?
I think there is a point in inquiries that aren't statutory. So in your view, are you then saying that the rape gang inquiry has no point?
I think this one lost its relevance when the government's statutory inquiry was launched. There's no point having two parallel inquiries, one run by the government, the other run by a backbench MP.
But they're not even parallel, are they? Because the rape gang inquiry report is now over, it's reported, and the government's statutory inquiry, years on from when people have been calling for it, Labour had to do a U-turn to actually go for it and vote for it. Many people voted against it. I mean, this has almost completed its work, or certainly completed the inquiry level before the statutory inquiry, the government inquiry, has actually started.
Look, that is the nature of a government inquiry. It's going to be slow because it has to be detailed and it has to get worthy outcomes. Look, I'm sure this is an excellent piece of work. I've only looked at the executive summary, but I am concerned about the people behind it. We've heard the language that Rupert Lowe uses about people from other countries, and it is deplorable. And so it is really hard to escape the reality that this is a man who comes to this with a lot of preconditions.
I think you are almost levelling a charge of dog whistling to this report, actually.
It's not far off,
That's what it sounds like to me, Sebastian, but I would urge you to look beyond that. I, like you, have only read the executive summary coming here today, which is excellent, I think. What I do think this is such a worthwhile piece on, especially given the backdrop of the murder of that 13-month-old child, of the reporting, of the accountability, of the joined-up thinking of the agencies and the coordination of the agencies involved in protecting children. You only have to speak to Maggie Oliver for 10 minutes and you will see a wonderful, wonderful woman. But the overriding issue that she has had was with the reporting of the young girls, and with the information that they gave, trusted professionals that didn't go any further. And this report here at the end says that our detailed list of, it's only recommendations because it's not statutory, as we're all very well aware, includes improved data recording on ethno-religious patterns among offenders. If we had that, the gangs might have been able to be infiltrated before now, and we might have been able to save some of those 250,000 white girls that were raped and damaged beyond recognition. We want far stronger sentencing, a comprehension deportation effort, tick, who wouldn't want that? Institutional accountability measures, of course. You know, we need to be able to go back to, if this was the Catholic Church, this would be kicked all the way up to the Pope, and hopefully it will be dealt with. But it needs to have clear lines of accountability, and then multi-agency coordination. That, for me, is paramount. That, for me, transcends DEI.
What's wrong with any of that, Sebastian?
Nothing's wrong with most of this, looking through it. What I would say is a lot of this feels a little bit obvious. I think some of it misses the mark in that data recording on ethno-religious patterns, a lack thereof, was not the reason this was missed. It was because people were afraid of being seen as racist, which is in itself a problem.
And Islamophobic.
But if you had recorded that, for example, from the start, a pattern could have emerged. You could have had actual data. Because I would put to you, Sebastian, that your attitude to this so far, you may not like Rupert Lowe, and that's fine. And if you don't like him, you don't like him. But there are various people involved with this, like Carla Lockhart for the DUP, is someone with great integrity. Nick Timothy, who really cares about this. I know it's Conservative and you're Labour, but nonetheless, I don't think you can disagree with certain things he says, but he really cares about this issue. They are putting this together because they feel that they don't have confidence in the statutory inquiry. And I would suggest that some of the attitude that you've exhibited there is actually part of the problem of why people don't trust the government on this.
So let me put it like this. I think there are some people, and you've named some of them there, who really, really care about this issue, who think that there was a drastic miscarriage of justice and that young girls have been thoroughly let down, and I would agree with them. But there are other people who build their political edifice on trying to scapegoat trying to scapegoat foreigners, and they make comments like Rupert Lowe has, saying things like they are third world savages, which I think we would all condemn in this room. And those people are trying to make political hay, and so we have a mixture of characters. And I'm concerned about Lowe's involvement in this. I think if he were less involved, I would probably have more truck with it.
So rape gang perpetrators are basically savages. I have no problem with that. I wouldn't talk about third world savages overall.
No.
And I think that is a misstep and something that Rupert Lowe shouldn't say. And there are certain views of Rupert Lowe that I don't hold sway with. But I don't disagree with anything in this report that I have read so far, and I have to admit I haven't read the whole thing. Claire, what do you make of that? Of what Sebastian said there?
Well, it goes back to my first initial point, that it does sound to me as if you are using this executive summary and Rupert Lowe and using them as they are dog whistling in terms of getting their point out.
Well, do you not think that there are people like Rupert Lowe who use issues that are very noble and very genuine, like this one, to further their political agenda?
So your accusation is that Rupert Lowe doesn't care. I don't want to put words in your mouth, Sebastian, but is your accusation that he doesn't care about rape gang victims and he's using them to further an anti-Muslim agenda? Is that what you think?
Put it like this. I only see him furthering the rights of women and girls when he can use it to talk down people from other countries. OK,
well, that might be your point. I don't necessarily agree with you on that. I think Rupert Lowe has been one of the only members of Parliament, actually, who's been willing to take this on board and deal with it.
And there are people, sorry to interrupt you, Claire, but there are people like Naz Shah, for example, who say that actually what Rupert Lowe is doing is correct.
And Sammy
Woodhouse. But I'm saying specifically with Naz Shah, with Naz Shah's background, are saying that actually this needs to be said. People are shying away from it. People are worried again about being called racist.
We agree on.
And are saying that this actually needs to be put into the public domain.
That we agree on. I think Rupert Lowe is the wrong person to carry it because of his other comments. It undermines his position here, and I think an independent inquiry like this is the wrong channel for it. But there is already a government inquiry.
He was the one who raised the GoFundMe page for this, correct me if I'm wrong.
You're absolutely right, £600,000.
He then had a duty of care to manage and had a responsibility for all of that money and to those people that entrusted him with doing what he said he would do, i.e. to deliver this. And I don't think this is whitewashing. I don't think this is dog whistling. I think this is pure and simple facts of the matter. Sebastian.
Just away from Rupert Lowe and this report in general, can you blame anybody, Rupert Lowe or whoever, can you blame anybody for wanting actions, results and justice on this? Because but then again we have, just brings me back to my original point, where the government says it won't set up an inquiry that lots of people want, U-turns on that, says they'll set it up, and it still hasn't even got its terms of reference or its head. So we're in a situation where there's so much more that could have been done very, very quickly. Keir Starmer every 5 minutes says defence is a priority, kids are a priority, this is a priority. But lots of our viewers and listeners and lots of people in the country are seeing from Labour that they don't see this as a priority. Rupert Lowe and whoever else is involved with this inquiry, and there are quite a few of them, do see it as a priority, to the extent that people were willing to give up their hard-earned cash to a GoFundMe to make it happen for £600,000. You can understand that frustration.
I can understand the frustration, but this is much less substantial than what a statutory inquiry would look like.
Is it not better than nothing?
I don't know really, because I think some things you have to put into the hands of the government. It's going back to your Pope example. If this happened in the Catholic Church, you wouldn't allow a vicar in a corner of London to raise money and do it themselves. You would escalate it to the top and allow it to be done properly.
But we live in a democracy and people can't do this.
A Muslim hasn't set this up, it was Rupert Lowe.
Yes, I know. And we do live in democracy, you're right.
Is there a risk here, Claire, that actually this inquiry could prejudice a statutory inquiry?
No, I don't think there
that's
is,
something that could, in theory, happen. There are strict provisions to prevent anyone from undermining the integrity of an investigation, destroying or concealing evidence, intentionally altering, suppressing, concealing or destroying relevant documents or data, that kind of thing. There's no suggestion that Rupert Lowe or anyone involved with that has done this, but are you worried that actually the statutory inquiry will not be free to do its job in the way that it should?
Absolutely not at all, because there have to be people above reproach, and you will hopefully have top legal minds teasing out the minutiae of witness statements and decent public servants working on it. And I think, moreover, I think this report would be extremely helpful in moving forward with safeguarding issues, and I think some of the recommendations need to be brought to light, and even just to have the discussion about it. I don't think this can be used pejoratively or be used as a report not for any good at all. I really don't.
Ian's been in touch with North Wales and has some thoughts for Sebastian. Good evening, Peter. Can you ask Sebastian if he knows me and my life? The last time he was on, his anti-straight white men with their privilege was not a disgrace. Is that the type of thinking that is the diverse issue? How dare you have this attitude? Both myself and all my friends growing up never had any privilege. In fact, the opposite. I've worked hard for everything my parents had, a hard life. My grandparents worked in the mills. How dare he thinks that all of us went to Eton and our ancestors ran vast estates? Just picking up on a thought from last week. What do you make of that?
I don't quite understand the argument.
I think we were talking last week about with Matthew Goodwin Freeman was on with you, and we were talking about specific internships that people could apply for.
That's right.
When they
different forms of privilege.
Yeah, exactly. And from ethnic minorities could go forward for it, but for example, white men could not.
Yeah. So I mean, just to pick that up, there are different forms of privilege, right? And we believe in intersectionality, so that you could be white, which would give you certain advantages in life, but you could be working class, which would give you certain disadvantages, and that we're all a mixture of our identities, and we have advantages and disadvantages as a result. So yeah, you can work very, very hard and overcome the odds because of your working class background, for example. But if you're white, you are going to enjoy certain benefits in life as a result. You're not going to face racism in Britain in the same way that people who are black and brown might.
Well, the Irish did when they came over.
Well, you're absolutely right. Claire in Buckley in North Wales has another thought for you. Sebastian says, how dare Sebastian say that Rupert's rape gang inquiry is a communications exercise? He's done more than this useless government have in their woeful, lacklustre inquiry that's barely started. Sebastian needs to remember that behind these rape gangs are children who have had their childhood, innocence and adult life stolen from them. They deserve justice. I'm not a Restore fan, but Rupert Lowe is standing up for the victims and doing what he said he would. Unlike previous Tory and now Labour governments, it is disgraceful on their part. What would you say to Claire?
I quite agree that they do deserve justice, and they deserve the very highest form of justice, which is why we need a statutory inquiry, and I'm pleased that one's happening.
Claire?
Absolutely.
OK, yeah. I think we'll probably leave this topic now. Is there anything else you want to say on it? Any other thoughts?
I don't actually. I think we've
covered it all right.
We've covered it completely. I
well,
think.
as I say, we will be talking in a few minutes' time after the debate. There's to Marlon West, who's a father of a rape gang abuse victim. If you have any questions you want me to ask him about this, Marlon was involved in this, please do let me know your thoughts. 0344 499 1000. And thank you to Catesby. He says, well done on holding Carnes to account. His attitude toward Julia yesterday left a lot to be desired. Why the criticism of reform about the union? There is no excuse for his being AWOL during the vote or speaking up for veterans being hounded through the courts. Not one word in their defence. I find him utterly disingenuous. Always an interesting and grounded show, says Catesby, and thank you for that. And Mick says, Sebastian proves exactly what this inquiry, why this inquiry was needed, putting his political dislike of a politician ahead of justice for the victims. I believe Restore might just be what this country needs. Do you want to respond to that?
Yeah, it's not about political dislike. It's about whether you say certain things and they undermine your credibility, and I think that's what Rupert Lowe's done here. He's made it very clear what he thinks about people from countries like those who were involved in the rape gangs, and I think that puts him at a disadvantage when it comes to impartiality. OK,
plenty more to talk about in the next section, and of course we will speak more about the rape gangs inquiry. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. Please let us know your thoughts. We'll be back with Sebastian and Claire in just a minute.
I'm genuinely disgusted when people continue to point out failure after failure after failure and do not provide balanced analysis of the deliverable of services like the police. What I don't see from reform is them standing next to some of these people that they continually criticise and saying, actually, they've made a mistake here. There is a requirement for a review and we must get through it. But I'd also like to thank the police for doing an excellent job at stopping the riots, doing this, breaking this criminal gang, doing the hard work they do day in, day out. And I think we take it for granted.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Well, if there's one thing that absolutely boils my blood, it is negligence, and it is authorities not doing what they should be doing, especially when it comes to the protection of children. It is something that we've seen with Baby P, it's something that we saw with Victoria Colombier. There are so many different examples. Sarah Sharif, for example, I covered that in depth a few months ago, and the dreadful things that happened that absolutely shouldn't happen. Here's another one. Here is a baby, 8 missed opportunities to save a baby killed by a teacher. Even before he became an adoptive parent, he was someone in a position of trust. Concerns about the child's care were repeatedly raised by health workers. On Monday, one of his adopted fathers was found guilty of murder. Social workers and medical staff were accused of having missed signs of abuse suffered by babies murdered by his adopted father. Preston Davey, just 13 months old when they died in the care of Jamie Varley and his partner John McGowan Fazzackerley. During his 4 months with the couple, he was sexually, physically and psychologically abused before being suffocated by an object stuffed into his mouth. I mean, it's dreadful. Debbie Davey, who was his biological grandmother, wasn't able to care for the baby because of a breast cancer diagnosis. She accused the authorities of having failed to spot the abuse. She also questioned whether social workers were too frightened of being accused of homophobia to properly scrutinise the behaviour of the 2 men who had adopted the child. On Monday, Varley was found guilty of murder, assault by penetration, child cruelty, sexual assault of a child, and making and distributing indecent photos. McGowan Fazzackerley was found guilty of allowing the death of a child 2 charges of child cruelty and 1 of sexual assault of a child. They're going to be sentenced on Thursday. I think they should absolutely throw the book at them. This just drives me mad, Claire, when we hear lessons will be learned, when we hear this is all going to be fine, we're going to make sure this is all right. Time and time and time again, this could have been sorted out in 4 months. He went from a baby who needed to go into care to being dead.
Yeah. This was a baby who had a really, really tough start in life. His biological mother is in prison, I think, for, well, she did a horrible thing to a pensioner. And then the baby was taken into care, Oldham care. The state then took care of this baby. The baby was put into foster care as temporary care for the child. This case throws up an awful lot of questions for me. It throws up the legitimacy and the stalwartness of a DBS check. Here was a man, regardless of his sexuality, because that, I don't think he committed those crimes because he was homosexual. I think he committed those crimes because he's evil.
Agreed.
Evil incarnate. However, he was a teacher. He must have had the highest level of DBS check. And therefore he went through the process of adoption. That is quite some scrutiny. Although I have said in the past, it's harder to adopt a cat or a dog from Battersea Dogs Home than it is to adopt a child sometimes in this country.
But it's interesting, you're right about all those checks that happen, and actually to be a person of trust in a childcare setting. I've been DBS checked because I did a bit of volunteering with a young man in the care system, actually. And I mean, that all that tells you is that at that moment in time, that person has no criminal record.
And I said that when Gordon Brown set this up, I was still a parent at school at this point, and as parents, we were asked to get the DBS checks. I refused, because I said, you've had me come in, I've, taken the children on lots of trips. I'm not going to get one. If you want to start that, I'm just not doing any more trips anymore. And that suited me, to be honest with you. But back to this case. This case, the child presented with over 40 injuries, right? There was a safeguarding issue here. Where was the social workers who handed that child over for adoption? There should have been follow-up checks. The foster mother, it's reported, is telling us that she had to teach the adopted father, the father that went for adoption, how to care for a baby, because she said he knew nothing.
How on earth did they become adoptive parents?
Exactly,
so
Peter.
I have a friend, and he's in a relationship with a man. In fact, they're married, and they have adopted 2 kids. They're brilliant parents, and they have done loads of classes, loads of things to do with dealing with kids and parenting and all the rest of it. Some of it is just instinct, as you know yourself.
Yes.
The grandmother said concerns had been flagged up at the hospital at least twice and nothing was done, it said the boy's grandmother. He had been to hospital a good few times and the hospital flagged it up and nobody went to see them check on Preston. That is disgusting. This is a woman who's dealing with a breast cancer diagnosis, who's trying to get someone to listen, Sebastian.
Yeah, and look, there were people who noticed something was wrong. The paediatric sister, the nurse, talked about unexplained injuries inconsistent with the version of events given. So people were aware of this, yet it fell through the cracks, which scares me. It scares me that this can happen in this country, and it scares me that it's not the first time it's happened in this country. And look, I often talk about rehabilitation and my hope that people can change and improve. I don't think that's the case.
Some people are just evil. There are just bad people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And there is part of our justice system that is about punishment, and I think that is the side that should show itself to these people.
There is absolutely no form of... I mean, obviously, they'll go to prison for a long time, get locked up, and that key well and truly thrown away. I don't want to either hear the words parole for either of these two.
No.
They are heinous, evil devils that should never see the light of day again. However, what we have to now go on from, and I'll take words from this executive summary, we need improved data recording, we need a multi-agency coordination, because I do think if that had happened, and I don't want to hear that Oldham Social Services was overworked, I don't want to hear that it might have been lost in the paediatric notes or something like that. This is a child's life that could have been saved, that should have been saved, that should never have had those atrocities happen to that poor young baby, 13 months old. I am just disgusted and lost for words.
Sebastian, quite a number of people have been in touch about your comments earlier. They have.
How are they feeling?
Well, they love you. They think you're a marvellous human being and should take over from me immediately. That might not be entirely accurate. Sarah has got in touch to say Sebastian's utterly... Let me read out a couple of them.
Go on.
And then I'll let you...
We'll do them
Can we
in
not have some positive ones?
There aren't any, Claire.
I'm reassured that, unfortunately, there aren't
little
any.
giggle I heard.
So, there we are. Maybe
Producer James Liney shaking his head there.
Sebastian's
What's the
fine.
number, Sebastian, and I'll text
You'll
it.
text it. 87222 with the word talk in your text. Sebastian is utterly wrong regarding racism to black and brown people. There is as much racism against white people in this country, says Sarah from Wales. Ernie says it's clear the government and people like Sebastian are not interested in the grooming gangs inquiry and are just hoping it will go away, because for people like them it's too horrible to contemplate. Glyn in Catterick says, I've nothing productive to add apart from settling in with a nice glass of red, watching yourself and Claire putting up with Sebastian.
What kind of red are you drinking?
Well,
I hope it's a nice Malbec.
Peter says, just listening to the discussion on rape gangs and Sebastian, whoever he may be, should be ashamed of his stance, which is definitely pro-Labour, who are involved in this cover-up up to their necks. I mean, he is a former Labour councillor, so I don't think he's kind of hiding that. And why Labour will never complete their statutory report. Don't invite him on again. Disgraceful. What would you like to say to those people, Sebastian?
See you on Tuesday for another one of these. Let's work backwards. I thought I made my feelings on the rape gangs very clear. I think it's horrible what's gone on, and I'm pleased there's a statutory inquiry, which is the highest form of inquiry you can have. What more can you ask for? And yes, it's moving slowly, but it's being thorough. We all want justice more quickly. Sometimes you have to wait. On the assertion that white people face as much racism as black and brown people, I'm not sure I can really respond to that. That feels like a strange position.
There is anti-white racism.
Yeah, of course there is, but it's not on the level of what black and brown people feel in this country.
I think if a minority of white people were over in Africa, the shoe might be on the different
Yes, but
foot.
this is Britain. This is a majority white country.
Exactly.
Another one I want to read out is from Anne. She says, let's not forget Star Hobson. Concerns raised by family, all dismissed by social work as malicious due to the mother being in a same-sex relationship. Star could have been saved. Sim in Wanstead also says, I'm sick to the back teeth of people being too scared to do the flipping job they take on. Yep. Whether it's a social worker or a police officer or whatever, people need to start finding their backbone.
They need to be braver.
If you're Sim says, if you're scared of being called homophobic or racist, find another job. Too many kids are being failed. I totally sympathise with what Sim is saying, but Claire, to give you the final word of the debate desk this evening, there's so many people who want to do the right thing in social work, in healthcare, in policing, in teaching, whatever, and they are crushed by so much regulation and so many worries that they'll be called racist, homophobic or whatever. Yep.
And my advice would be strong, be resilient, and have a good, strong moral compass that will direct you to the place that's the best place for either your client, your child, or whomever minor you are looking after, because they are more important than you are.
Thank you both very much indeed. Sebastian Salek there and Claire Muldoon, political commentators, both appreciate you joining us, and we will see you, as I say, next week. Delighted to have you on as always.
Thank you.
Marlon West is going to be with us in a second, the father of a rape gang abuse victim, as promised, talking about Rupert Lowe's inquiry. What do you think about what Sebastian has said, about what Claire has said, everything we've talked about this evening? Al Carnes as well, 0344 499 1000. Alison, County Antrim, says, I agree with Claire. Animals have as many, if not more, rights than what human babies and children and tweens do in our society. It should always be about the young ones, the most vulnerable. I hope this pair rot in hell. If I had my way, it would be the death penalty. It wouldn't cost me a thought in this case of Preston, says Alison in County Antrim. Lots more comments coming in. Do get your thoughts on the air by ringing me 0344 499 1000. So much more to discuss in just a few minutes' time. Stay with us.
across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Well, a very good evening and thank you for your company here in the Evening Exchange. I'm Peter Cardwell. You can get your call in this evening on anything we're talking about. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. The big story this evening is that the rape gang inquiry from Rupert Lowe and the others who've been involved with that is out, and it is damning in what it says about the system and very vociferous in what it says needs to change. We'll talk to someone who was heavily involved with that, the father of a rape gang abuse victim, Marlon West. He joins us in a second, as does the broadcaster and podcaster Nuria Khan, who knows an awful lot about Muslim community. She describes herself as an ex-Muslim. We'll talk to this hour about Preston Davey, the little boy, little baby, 8 missed opportunities to save him. He was killed by a teacher who was his adoptive father. Absolutely dreadful. The furious grandmother of the baby murdered and abused by the teacher, calling for social workers to be sacked over the missed chances to save the baby. We'll also talk to Colonel Richard Kemp, the former head of the army, on the Russian warship that fired warning shots at the yacht in the Channel. We'll speak to him this hour. So much to talk about. We also spoke to Al Carnes a little bit earlier on, the Armed Forces Minister, former Armed Forces Minister, and he did an interview with us too, so you can respond to that too if you would like to. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. You can text me 87222 with the word talk in your text. You can tweet me at talkTV. Follow me at Peter Cardwell. You can send me a WhatsApp voice message or a WhatsApp text message on the main number, or you can give me a ring on the main number, which is, of course, 0344 499 1000. Jess Phillips as well, breaking news. She has told the podcast that a social media ban would have stopped her quitting as a minister. That is the former safeguarding minister, Jess Phillips. She quit a couple of weeks ago, and she says that had the social media ban been in place, it would have stopped her quitting as a minister. We'll see if we can get you a clip of that. That's just dropped on Sky News, one of their podcasts. I'm not sure it's quite out yet, but certainly the words are. Lots to discuss with all of that, and we will make sure that you get your voice on the air. 0344 499 1000. Stay with us. Thank you to everybody who's been in touch. Plenty of reaction to Sebastian, David in Leicestershire, saying Sebastian, who was on our debate desk just a few minutes ago, he'll be back next week. Sebastian is more worried about ethnic minorities being called savages than these poor girls whose lives have been ruined. It shows why we have no government inquiry. Well done, Rupert Lowe. Shame the two-tier white-hating left, says David in Leicestershire. Lee's also been in touch and talking about the Al Carnes interview, and said that Al Carnes think that the Renters Reform Act, which will lead to fewer landlords, fewer rental properties and higher rents, is a good idea. He also thinks that giving thousands of extra benefits to those with multiple children is good. You don't get children out of poverty by teaching them to be reliant on the state. Get parents to pay for their own kids by lowering taxes and making work pay, says Lee from Leeds. And Elisa in Chelmsford says, evening Peter, evening Elisa. What Al Carnes means is that he hasn't yet secured the 81 names to proceed with the leadership bid. He did slightly dodge the question about whether he was going to run. Regarding the heinous murder of Preston, Elisa says, I had an attachment with the child protection team as a copper for 1 week many years ago. That's all I could stomach. I couldn't sleep knowing how some evil people treat children. Credit to the officers who work in such units. I could not do it, says Elisa, who's a former police officer. On the Iran-US deal, we're going to talk about that a little bit later. Elisa says, what a mess, what a betrayal to the Iranian people and to Israel. Rubio is against it, and I cannot wait for him to become president one day, if only he was now. So lots to discuss. And then Nat in Tel Aviv says she's very much looking forward to hearing what Richard Kemp says. I certainly am too. He has an expert view on so many things, and we will talk about the US-Iran issue and also that very worrying development earlier about a Russian warship firing shots at a yacht in the Channel. But now I want to talk about Rupert Lowe and his report. It wasn't just him, there were various others who helped with it. Carla Lockhart is an MP from the DUP. We also know that Nick Timothy, the Shadow Justice Secretary, was heavily involved with it too, as was Marlon West, the father of a rape gang abuse victim we're going to speak to in just a second. Let me just bring you a little bit of what Rupert Lowe has said about this particular inquiry, which reported today. Let's see what the leader of Restore Britain has been saying.
We're also intent on naming those people in Parliament, where we're not going to prejudice a legal case, so that everybody knows those people who are responsible, who should have dealt with this but failed to deal with it. So it's been a long, hard, arduous 16 months, and I want to thank everybody. And I hope that every member of the British public has the time to read this. It's not straightforward. It will take time, but it needs to be understood and it needs to be dealt with, and dealt with now.
Well, we are hoping, I should say, to speak to Marlon West, the father of the rape gang abuse victim who's involved with this report. We just can't get to him just at this exact moment, having some technical difficulties, but we'll make sure we speak to him as soon as we can. Nuria Khan is with me now, and I'm delighted to have her back on the programme. Nuria, this is a very interesting... First of all, good evening and thank you for joining me again. You're becoming a very valued and favoured guest because you speak such absolute common sense. On this rape gang inquiry, the inquiry found evidence of how the police discouraged victims, destroyed evidence, in some cases were active members of networks. Social care placed children into homes that became hubs for traffickers. The NHS failed to act on obvious signs of sexual abuse and even sent children back to their abusers. Schools ignored clear safeguarding concerns and instead punished and excluded victims. In the executive summary, it is written that the overwhelming majority of the rape gang network consisted entirely of men from Muslim backgrounds, predominantly of Pakistani heritage, although smaller groups from Somali, Iranian, Syrian, Turkish and other Muslim origins were involved. And there's quite a lot of detail, actually, I was reading about the doctrine of Muslim superiority drawn from Quranic verses that positions Muslims at the top with a duty to correct non-believers. The gang members' justification for their crimes can be found in the Islamic principles of loyalty and disavowal. It demands enmity towards non-Muslims, the superiority of men over women, forced marriage combined with the absence of any fixed minimum age of consent. The perception of female sexuality is inherently dangerous. A system of sex slavery that authorises sexual relations with non-Muslim captives, and a religiously sanctioned social hierarchy that subjugates conquered non-Muslims. Do you agree with that?
I mean, I was, well, first of all, thank you for having me, Peter. I wish it was under better circumstances, yes. But I am so grateful that finally this report has come to light, regardless of how horrific and harrowing some of the details are in it. I was honoured to be part of this in terms of giving evidence of the Islamic doctrine and, you know, British Pakistani families' manifestations of how they interpret Islam in this context. So unfortunately, I'm going to have to agree with what you've just said and say, yes, that is absolutely part and parcel of what's gone on to have this tragedy occur. And this is what makes this inquiry, and this is why I'm eternally grateful for Rupert Lowe, regardless of what you think of the man. He has gone beyond what any report has gone thus far. Take the J report, the Casey report. This report finally makes the inextricable link between religious and spiritual abuse, i.e. Islam in this case, with the actual abuse that was perpetrated. I have been saying this time and time again, as have many whistleblowers. We have taken victim survivors' testimonies from years ago, where they have been saying over and over again, time and time again, that there were certain words that were uttered to them, there were certain verses of the Quran being quoted to them as they were being beaten. They had racially motivated, indications from the perpetrators when they would call them, and I hate to say these things on air, but they would call them, you know, white scum and slags, and make sure that they, in the Pakistani context, you say the word Gora, it literally refers to white in their language, and then they would also enable Sharia law whenever they required to sometimes forcibly marry these young girls, and then they would treat them as their wives, who then they can beat as well, according to the Quran, and have them walk 5 feet behind them when they were going to a medical appointment to try and get a termination or something for when the abuse has gone awful. So you can imagine how much Islam played a part in this. We have to believe victim survivors when they've said to us from years ago that the grooming gangs operated like terror networks. What does that mean? That means that they recruit, and the ideology and the justifications are the exact same as they are when you're dealing with Islamic terrorism. This is an extension of that, and I'm very grateful that the report goes into jihad, and you understand the concept of waging war against non-Muslims requires also taking sexual slaves. And it's just like sexual warfare in any situation where you want to humiliate not only the native population, but the British state in a wider context.
How and why have we been so reticent to come to these conclusions before? Is it simply fear of being called racist? Because that has manifested itself in lots of different ways. It's not just about people not calling it out and saying these things. It's also manifested itself in lots of different ways of essentially saying, well, I don't want to be called racist, therefore I won't raise a child safeguarding concern. I won't refer this to social services, or it will be missed or put down the priority level by social services, by healthcare, by education. I mean, this is a multifaceted, systematic failure of, we're talking about, I mean, what is alleged to be 250,000 women and girls in this country in 149 local authority districts, close to 40% of all districts in the United Kingdom.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of different factors at play here, Peter, but definitely across the board, there was this overarching fear of being labelled racist when dealing with perpetrators of a certain ethnic minority. And I would like to think, working in this sector, that we have come very far since then in recognising group-based child sexual exploitation, or seeing the warning signs, even when, you know, on the baseline, it seems like, okay, this could be a vulnerable girl and she is, you know, abusing substances, or she's disappearing for long periods of time. But that's no reason to kind of close the case or dismiss it or fob it off as that she's got some behavioral problems. You need to still go that much further and investigate the case and raise safeguarding concerns. And I think there was failures all across the board, from them not showing up to colleges to the social care workers being, I would say, everything from being dismissive at the best to involved by themselves as well, and also marrying some of these. If you read some of the testimony within this inquiry, there are social care workers who are marrying the siblings of the victims of grooming gangs. So they're heavily involved in this circle of...
And I mean, I did a story, I think it was about a year ago, of someone who was dealing with care centres for vulnerable young people who are maybe in their late teens, who are perhaps such complex needs, or they're trying to get them in to deal with themselves, to cook and clean and have a little room by themselves rather than being in foster care. And obviously it's very difficult to recruit for those kinds of jobs. And what happened was that there were people adjacent to these rape gangs, like sisters or brothers or whoever, who were going for those jobs and trying to recruit people within them. I did a very absolutely harrowing interview with someone on this about a year ago, and I just wonder what you would say, Nuria, to people who say Islam's a religion of peace, this is a bastardized version of what Islam is, this isn't how most Muslims worship or think. What would you say to that?
Look, most Muslims are not carrying this out, but the fact that this travesty has happened to English girls on an industrial scale in this country, and it was covered up to pander to the Muslim vote bank. I used to believe in this religion. The very verses that you see quoted by, you know, everybody that's contributed to this inquiry, including fellow ex-Muslims like Ayan Hirsi Ali and other experts on Islam who have studied this religion, and whistleblowers who have been within the system, I can tell you that these verses and this disgusting othering and the way that Islam views non-Muslim women is so much the reason behind why I left the religion in the first place. I couldn't stomach it as a woman reading what the Quran said towards like how you should treat non-Muslim women, and the whole reason why Muslim women cover up in the first place so that they're not harassed and molested, because everybody else is okay to be harassed and molested. And if you look at the grooming gangs again, they targeted English girls, they targeted Sikh girls, and they targeted Hindu girls. What's the common denominator? They're all non-Muslim. Look at all the different ethnicities of the people involved. What's the common denominator? They're Muslim. So I would absolutely say, Peter, we cannot bury our heads in the sand anymore. Religious abuse played a huge part of this, and it's sanctioned by the very scriptures of Islam itself.
What do you think needs to happen now, especially as there is a statutory inquiry? It's barely got moving. It's been incredibly slow, and so many in the government party, so many in Labour, didn't want it. There was the deputy leader of the Labour Party who called it dog whistle politics. It is now established. It will happen, but it's going to take a long time. This of what is reported today as a non-statutory inquiry was put together by £600,000 of money donated to a GoFundMe, a fundraiser for it. There is a little bit more money and they will try to have private prosecutions. But what do you think should happen now, Nuria?
Well, I think shame on the political parties, especially Labour, that it's taken this long. Thank goodness there was an independent inquiry, because we are now able to shine a spotlight on a big part and reason what was driving the mentality and motivation behind these perpetrators, which I'm so sorry to say, Peter, I don't think they're going to go into as much detail on that in the national inquiry, just because as a state, as an establishment, we do not touch Islam. We give it the same.
I agree with you. I cannot imagine a statutory inquiry that would go into this detail, would quote bits of Quranic verses and be as blunt and sort of straightforward about all this in a national inquiry. I was really not surprised. I'm not surprised that Rupert Lowe and others have written this, but the paragraph that absolutely stood out to me, Nuria, is political failure lies at the heart of this scandal. Successive governments lacked the will to confront the ethnic and religious patterns. The Labour Party bears particular responsibility. It initially refused a public inquiry and only relented under pressure by ordering a process viewed with widespread scepticism.
Exactly. They sacrificed their own girls, their own young, vulnerable girls at the altar of the vote bank. And I'm sorry to say, I do not see any change in that. They're going to tiptoe around the issues of Islam. They might, concede a few points and say, we will start to record the ethnicities of perpetrators. But I'm sorry, it does not go far enough, and it's too little too late. You need to have trauma-informed specialists across the board within these councils. You need people who actually understand how these Islamic principles manifest in the practical sense. How does an extremist Muslim mindset use the Quran to go and exploit a white working class girl? You need to understand that. You can't just, say in general, like, oh, we're going to look into this demographic more. Absolutely not. You need people who are going to confront the scripture and the fact that Islam does allow itself for this level of abuse and sexual violence, if we really want to get serious about violence against women and girls. And just again, shame on any safeguarding minister or any minister who considers themselves an ally of women and girls and their safety in this country, when they cannot even, they're sitting there kissing the rings of elders, going to these same councils who have covered up these very atrocities.
Nuria, always worth speaking to you. Tell us the name of your podcast.
Beyond Belief with Nuria Khan.
Thank you. One to listen to, certainly. Nuria Khan, their broadcaster and podcaster. Really appreciate you joining us. Again, we haven't been able to contact Marlon, but we are hoping to speak to him, or indeed Sammy Woodhouse, both of whom were heavily involved with this rape gang inquiry report that a little bit later on in the programme. I think there's maybe been some technical issues there, but we will speak to them. And I don't know about you, but listening to Nuria Khan there, I don't think she could have been clearer. I don't think her views could have been stronger. I don't think her diagnosis of this and her opinions and her recommendations could have been more honestly felt. I really was very struck, as I always am, by what she said here, and deeply worried about where we are as a country and the fact that some of this is still going on to this day, as we know. We'll take some calls next. If you want to have your voice on the programme, you're more than welcome to give me a ring, 0344 499 1000. Stay with us here on Talk.
I'm genuinely disgusted when people continue to point out failure after failure after failure and do not provide balanced analysis of the deliverable of services like the police. What I don't see from reform is them standing next to some of these people that they continually criticise and saying, actually, they've made a mistake here. There is a requirement for a review and we must get through it. But I'd also like to thank the police for doing an excellent job at stopping the riots, doing this, breaking this criminal gang, doing the hard work they do day in, day out. And I think we take it for granted.
the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Well, thank you to everybody who has been in touch. We'll get to more of your texts and tweets in just a second, but I want to go to the phones now, and Matt in Cheshire has given me a ring about Al Carnes and what he has been saying a little bit earlier on. We spoke to him about an hour ago. Matt, you're very welcome to the programme. What would you like to say?
Hi, evening, Peter.
Evening, hi.
Al Carnes seemed like a great guy in Labour terms, and it was a great interview.
Thank you.
But he knew when he ran for office and ran to become a Labour MP that Keir Starmer had called for NATO to be disbanded in the past.
And that he served under Jeremy Corbyn, who believed the same thing.
And yeah, that he was like the second in command under Corbyn, and that he unscrupulously tracked down and hunted down ex-British soldiers. So I was thinking, you know, if he went into the election knowing those things, and now he's saying, "Oh look, it's all terrible," and I never had a clue.
Well, I think I think specifically on the legacy thing, on the Northern Ireland Legacy Bill and prosecuting veterans, I do think it's good to be on the inside to try to have change from there, but you do have to maintain the public stance where you say, actually, this is great and we're putting it all together and it's going to be a good piece of legislation, knowing that that's not the case. And sometimes that's kind of the price you pay as a government minister. You're not going to be a government minister if you come out and say, actually, this is all rubbish, because then you get sacked and you lose your ability to change things from the inside. Do we need to be more understanding of that, or can we just call him a hypocrite?
No, I understand all that, and we did have a lot of talk from the Conservatives under Johnny Mercer and such, and we had a lot of, you know, this will be put to bed forever, those guys can get on with their lives now, and yet it's still going on now to this day.
Well, in fairness, the Conservatives did put a bill together. Lots of people weren't happy with it, and then Labour put their own legislation in as well. So there's a lot of change in this, certainly.
Was it Steve Baker involved in that, I think, wasn't it?
Yeah, I think you're right, yeah.
Nothing ever came of it. But I just find, you know, in the grand scheme of things, for a Labour MP, he's grounded. I think he's great. But he can't say that he didn't know that Keir Starmer was sort of weak on defence, and now claim to say that they're now trying to flip everything on its head, as they do with everything, and say, oh, we're exceptionally strong on defence. Literally called for NATO to be disbanded when he was a lawyer, and him and Lord Hermer have been anti-British soldiers their entire career.
It is a very odd thing, certainly, that we have you know, there are all sorts of allegations against Lord Hermer, Phil Shiner, and he was an unscrupulous solicitor. No suggestion, obviously, Richard Hermer was in any way unscrupulous in what he did. But there are so many stories around about this. And Al Carnes wouldn't be drawn, and it annoyed me, but sometimes you get places in interviews, sometimes you don't, about who, when he said people stopped listening to me, and I said, well, who? You know, was it the Prime Minister? Was it the Attorney General? Was it people in the MOD, people in the Northern Ireland office? Was it Hilary Benn? And I'd love to know, you know, who is really pushing this? Where is it coming from, essentially? Because we can talk as much as we want to about the fact that the Attorney General and the Prime Minister are former human rights lawyers, and maybe that's where some of this is coming from. I think some of it is certainly that I disagree with and you disagree with on an honest basis, Matt. But if you have someone who's trying to make a point and trying to change this, well, can it be changed, or is this just going to be steamrollered through?
Was that not the soldier in him staying loyal to the chain of command, whereas an unscrupulous politician would just dob them in instantly?
It's a very fair point, actually, and maybe that was part of it. And certainly, maybe he's got one eye on the future, thinking if he becomes, you know, Defence Secretary or Prime Minister or whatever, he will want people to be loyal to him.
Exactly. Yeah, I think it shows a little bit of human quality that he didn't just think of his own career first and
throw them under a bus. Very interesting, Matt. Always worth talking to you. And that is Matt in Cheshire there. I appreciate his points. Alan is in Salford and has some thoughts too. He's given me a ring on 0344 499 1000. I think it's the Russian attack on Keir Starmer's house that you want to talk about, Alan.
No, it's the boats.
Oh, the boats. Okay, yes. Just to remind people...
A broadside across the...
Yes, in the channel. Just to remind people who may not be aware of this, this happened earlier today, and it is a very, very worrying attack by Russia. The warship firing shots at a yacht in the Channel, and the Coast Guard received reports this morning from a British-flagged civilian vessel sailing near the Admiral Grigorovich, a Russian frigate. Alan, your thoughts on this?
Well, it's ridiculous, really, because Mr. Starmer took the sanctions off Russia and he let them sell their oil instead of getting our oil out and our gas out, you know. So all this money that Russia's getting now, they're buying missiles and sending them at Ukraine. But also, we're giving money to Ukraine to stop the missiles. It's ridiculous.
It doesn't seem to make a lot of sense. Certainly, Kemi Badenoch was talking about that at Prime Minister's Questions a couple of weeks ago, Alan. Do you think we're strong enough when it comes to Russia?
You're joking. Actually, to be honest with you, tongue-in-cheek, we'd be better off letting that Russian frigate sort the boats out coming into this country. But
maybe it might get somewhere with it. You don't feel the gangs have been smashed, Alan?
No. There's only one way to smash the gangs, is to actually fire all the border force and put the Navy in the sea.
Alan, thanks for your thoughts. Appreciate that. That's Alan in Salford there. Clayton in Dartford says, please play back Nerea's interview to that prize Pillock Sebastian next week and then see what he has to say about his beloved Labour Party then. Claire says it's also happening to Scottish girls. Absolutely. And in fact, there's a very good Scottish MP. She's had some controversy recently, but particularly when it comes to rape gangs, Joni Reid has done an awful lot on this. She's on the Home Affairs Select Committee, and definitely Claire is right, and you should look into what Joni Reid is doing and saying, sometimes in a very unpopular way with a lot of people about this particular issue. Joanna in Salisbury says, Claire is right, Claire Muldoon, who was on the debate desk, Claire is right about various people getting a backbone and standing up to be counted. The problem they face is the sack or huge reputational damage being put on their files. I'm the type to stand up whatever the cost, and I have. People have families and mortgages to pay. What are they supposed to do? Well, listen, I totally agree with you on that, and I think there are a lot of disincentives to stand up. There are lots of ways that we incentivise compliance rather than actually standing up and having your opinion, which is why stations like this are so incredibly important, where we say the unsayable, we talk about things in a common sense, reasonable and straightforward way. And if you want to do that, if you want to join Alan and Matt on the line, and if you want to put your points across, whatever it is you want to talk about, please do so. 0344 499 1000. We're going to talk about Preston Davey in a second. 8 missed opportunities to save the baby murdered by a teacher. He's going to be sentenced on Thursday, and I hope they throw the book at him. Melanie's been in touch and said, I think everyone involved who did nothing, i.e. social workers, nurses and whoever, should be sacked. How on earth did the high school teacher ever get to work in a school? He has brought the teaching community, teaching profession into disrepute, to say nothing of the gay community. It is so upsetting. Words cannot describe how people are feeling about this. I feel really upset about this, Melanie. I'm totally honest and clear about that, and I just think it is disgraceful what happened. Absolutely horrendous. We're going to be talking about it with the consultant for the Safeguarding Network, Sharon Birch, who will be with us in just a second after the break. As I say, lots of time between now and 10 o'clock to get your thoughts on the air. 0344 499 1000. Stay with us.
across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Well, I don't know about you, but I'm absolutely sick and tired of these stories, absolutely disgraceful stories about children, often babies, who are abused. And on this occasion, some of the detail you're about to hear is pretty disturbing. And if you have children listening, you might want to warn them about this, or turn the radio down or TV just for a couple of seconds, because social workers and medical staff are accused of having missed 8 opportunities to report and to act on abuse suffered by a baby murdered by his adoptive father. Preston Davey was the baby, 13 months old, when he died in the care of Jamie Varley and his partner John McGowan-Fazakerley. During just 4 months with the couple, baby Preston was sexually, physically and psychologically abused before being suffocated by an object stuffed into his mouth. On Monday, Varley was found guilty of murder, assault by penetration, child cruelty, sexual assault of a child and making and distributing indecent photos. McGowan-Fazakerley, his partner, was found guilty of allowing the death of a child. 2 charges of child cruelty and 1 of the sexual assault of a child are going to be sentenced on Thursday. Absolutely unspeakable stuff, and just the worst kind of abuse of a totally defenceless, innocent baby. I just think, how on earth were these people put forward to be adoptive parents? How on earth were these different opportunities, 8 different opportunities in 4 months, so on average once every 2 weeks, where things were raised? There were some good people in this who said, there are serious issues here, we need to deal with them, but they weren't acted upon. For more on this, I'm joined by Sharon Birch, who's a consultant for the Safeguarding Network. Sharon, where was the professional curiosity here? Where were these people who, some of whom raised red flags here, but so little was actually done, to the extent that Preston was murdered?
Well, this is a very common theme that we're seeing very often in these cases. The professional curiosity isn't there. People don't think the unthinkable. And I think one of the problems here is, because these 2 men were professionals, we don't like to think that they're the sort of people that would do this sort of thing. Society has an impression of what a child abuser is. And I don't think these guys fit that particularly. So when it comes to plausible excuses and charming manipulation, these people are very adept at doing that sort of thing to not get caught. So when we look at when they present to the hospital and the excuses that they give, professionals want to believe them, but we mustn't. We must have professional curiosity. We must think the unthinkable, and anything could be happening anywhere behind anybody's closed doors. And if we think it isn't, that's when we get it wrong. So
in your professional opinion, Sharon, from what you know of this case, there was almost a prejudice saying, well, this seems like a nice middle-class couple, perhaps this is the explanation and we should accept that. You've got to be really, really cynical, don't you? And I mean, there are some people who say social services go overboard, they take children off people, they do too much. It's about finding the balance, but certainly when it comes to the abuse of an infant, not even an infant, a baby, we're in a situation where there are all sorts of prejudices. I wonder whether there were people worried about being called homophobic as well.
Well, yeah, I mean, that's a huge factor as well. And let's not forget there's a serious case review about to take place with Oldham Council, and they will look at all of these things. And obviously, I'm not privy to all of the information, but I think collectively, professionals, there's not enough people to do the work that they should be doing. You know, we've all got a lack of resources, a lack of time, a lack of professionals. And when you've got a very busy caseload, it's easy to miss things. And that is certainly not an excuse. And yes, I think these guys have fooled people, and we don't want to think it happens. And professionally, we're all very busy, so it's easy to accept a ready excuse. But when we look at the lowest age of children, the most at risk between 0 and 1, Preston was not, was in that age range, and he presented at hospital with 3 separate injuries, and on the 4th time, unfortunately, was the last time. And I would say we should have been asking questions, but when you present to different doctors each time, different staff each time, and they come across so plausible, these people are masters at manipulation. And you can see how it can get through. But going back to your question about social workers, it's not just social workers, it's every professional that works in safeguarding. We need the training, we need the resources, we need the time, and we need most of all to be asking those questions.
It's interesting that when you look, and horrifying, that when you look at the report, that Helen McGee, the independent reviewer from Oldham Social Services, visited Preston at home, and she wrote to Preston in this report, "Preston, I did watch your responses to your daddies quite carefully, as I am aware that you have had a few hospital admissions of late, and this made me ponder a little as to whether there was a problem that I couldn't see. I decided there wasn't an issue." Debbie Davey, who is Preston's grandmother, who couldn't look after him herself because she had a breast cancer diagnosis, said, "The social worker involved in Preston's case is still working. I am fuming about that. She was supposed to be checking on Preston. I think it's terrible that she is still working and my baby is dead. Social services might have been hesitant to take action when they saw Preston because they may have been accused of being homophobic. They didn't see through them and see what was going on with Preston. As soon as you see a baby with a broken arm, you ask questions." I do wonder whether there were so many people who were worried. Well, we've talked about the homophobia issue, we've talked about the fact that they're professional people as well. There were people who did raise red flags. There were people who did say there may well be something here, and that just wasn't taken seriously. I do wonder how we get through that. You talk about training, you talk about dealing with people and saying to them how they raise concerns, but at what stage, if you're not taken seriously, or you're perhaps told or encouraged not to make too much of a fuss, at what stage do you say, you know, screw the mortgage and the job, I'm going to make a fuss about this?
I know it's very difficult, but having said that, we've got to put the safety of our children first. And if we have concerns, it's about communication as well. And where it falls down is when people don't communicate. You might have 5 or 6 different people, each have a niggle or a concern, but unless they get together and talk about it, it's like a jigsaw puzzle. There's all those pieces that don't join up, and we should have more joint practice. And if you look at all of the safeguarding reviews, the lessons to be learned, it's always communication, and it's always talking to each other and sharing information. We need collectively to get better at that. Forget GDPR and data protection. When it comes to safeguarding of children, the child is the priority, not GDPR and data protection. And if we have a concern, we should take that further. I mean, Helen is going to be coming under quite a lot of scrutiny. I don't know her. I don't know all of her involvement, so it's unfair for me to comment on her particularly. But she will be coming under scrutiny, and the fact that she's raised that did show that she had concerns at the time. What we expect to see in professionals is, where do you then take that and how far do you go?
Exactly. It's interesting as well, another story we're covering today is about the rape gangs inquiry. Rupert Lowe and others have put a report out, and actually I'm going to be speaking to a rape gang victim, Sammy Woodhouse, a little bit later on in the programme. She is going to claim that ITV told her not to mention the race and background of her perpetrators in her interview this morning. She's since received an apology from the editor of that programme for this. Again, we're seeing ways in which people don't want protected characteristics, minorities, whether it's Muslims, whether it's gay people, whatever it is, to be brought up and to be mentioned in the context, even when it's factual and even when it's relevant.
When we're talking about things like this, and the safeguarding of children should always be the priority, it should be the forefront of everybody's mind. We've got to forget about race, ability, disability, gender, sex, all of the protected characteristics, because anybody and everybody across society can be capable of committing these offences, and if we think they're not, then we're wrong, we're on the wrong track. We have to be open-minded to think that anybody and everybody could be capable of these things.
Yeah, it's a really, really interesting point. I mean, when you look at safeguarding in general, when you look at how things like DBS checks, those disclosure and borrowing checks, are done, this guy, this murderer, went through that. He was in a position of trust in a school. He was in a position of trust as an adoptive father, and that is something, you know, there's so many people I know, my age, I'm 42, Sharon, there are a load of people who maybe can't have kids or have had trouble conceiving, and they're thinking, you know, maybe we'll adopt, and I'd love them to do that, because there are 80,000 children in the care system in England who would love an adoptive family and would thrive within it, I expect, and there are very, very many excellent adoptive and foster parents out there. There is a minority, and there are people like these two scumbags who are going to be sentenced on Thursday, who are awful, horrible people. The system is very, very difficult to actually get through in terms of adopting. And I wonder, you know, should that be made even more difficult, actually, when it's going to put off a lot of good people who do want to adopt and foster?
Well, I don't think we can have too many safeguards when we come to do all of the checks. And I think what we do as a society is we think the DBS is the gold standard. The DBS is just one standard, and all a DBS does is prove you have not yet been caught. It is essential we do them, and I would never advocate not doing them, but it's not the only thing. You know, it's part of the whole of the safeguarding system and checks that we have to do. And we have to be robust. We have to ask questions. We have to look at finances and family history and family structure. We have to look at everything. And these people, like I say, those people that are intent on abusing children will find every which way to do it. And that means fooling people and being manipulators and being very charming. And they'll go to any lengths to get to do. They put themselves in positions where they have access to children. We can never have too many safeguards. And I think we've got to lose the emphasis on DBS. Yes, we need them, but it's not the only standard, and it's not foolproof.
Sharon, really interesting to speak to you. I hope to speak to you again under better circumstances, but you really have a lot of common sense, wisdom and experience to add to the conversation, so I really appreciate you coming on this evening. That's Sharon Birch there, who's a consultant for the Safeguarding Network. Really interesting to hear from her, and I just think she was very direct there. I think she was very honest in her answers, because there's so many people who aren't direct and so many people who aren't honest in what they do and how they conduct themselves. It's interesting, certainly the editor of Good Morning Britain has apologised to Sammy Woodhouse. She's going to come on in a few minutes' time to talk about her interview on Good Morning Britain this morning. She was told not to mention the race or background of her perpetrators in her interview. I mean, the whole point of this inquiry is to talk about that and to not shy away from that, and the fact that she was told to do that, not by the editor of Good Morning Britain, by the way, who's a former colleague of mine, a man called Daniel Robinson, who has apologised to her, and rightly so, and good for him for doing that and taking responsibility for doing so. But she's now received an apology for that. I mean, why a producer would say that to her in the first place, clearly not having any conception of what the inquiry was about, really is astonishing. I don't like sitting here slagging off other journalists, but really that was pretty shameful, and good for Daniel Robinson for making that apology, the editor of Good Morning Britain. We're going to talk to Colonel Richard Kemp in just a second, the former commander in the British Army, about this Russian warship firing warning shots at a yacht in the Channel. There's quite a lot around on the US-Iran deal as well. I expect he'll have a view on that too. Stay with us here on Talk.
We've got some breaking news that has just come in. talkSPORT have announced a brand new partnership in a developing story. We hear they've created So Good Lager right in time for football's big summer. Just in, we're hearing that So Good Lager will be pouring pints across all O'Neill's pubs and some of the best sports pubs across the UK. With the big kickoff just around the corner, you can find out where to get your hands on a fresh pint of So Good Lager at talksport.com/lager.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Well, thank you to everybody who's been in touch with calls, texts, tweets and voices. We'll get back to those in just a minute or two. But I want to speak to the former British Army Commander, Colonel Richard Kemp, on the Russian warship that has fired warning shots at a yacht in the Channel. Richard, thank you for joining us. How serious is this, do you think?
Well, I think it's very serious. It's very clearly a carefully thought through Russian response to Britain's seizure, or boarding at least, of a Ghost Fleet tanker 2 days before. Clearly they're sending the message that keep doing this and there will be a response from us. And this is their response. Obviously, this is a relatively light response from the Russians, but they're hoping that it will frighten Prime Minister Starmer away from authorising further boardings of the ghost ships.
This is probably an alarmingly stupid question, but you're probably used to them from me. How are we so sure the two events are connected?
Well, I think there can be little doubt about that. I mean, 2 days before, for the first time ever, the British government ordered the boarding of a Russian ghost ship, having decided to do so back in March. And since March, something like 200, I think, Ghost Fleet ships have sailed through the English Channel unmolested by us. And then 2 days ago, we take action. And then 2 days later, this happens. Yeah, you could say it's a coincidence. I think people might think that in some cases. I don't really believe in coincidences in this type of situation. And the excuse that's being made for the firing of shots in the direction of a British registered yacht or boat is that the boat was getting dangerously close to the Russian warship. But the way you deal with that situation is not going to be firing bullets at it. The way you deal with it is well established in maritime law, and it includes using the radio, which the Russians had the capability of talking either directly to this boat or else to the Coast Guard, firing flares, operating sirens, which the ship has very loud sirens on board. So there's several measures which you can legitimately use to avoid a collision. They don't include firing bullets.
Could that have been a last resort? We don't know, it seems, that if those other mechanisms were followed, but not to be in any way sympathetic to the Russians here, but can you see any reason why this would have happened beyond an aggressive act?
No, I don't think so. Okay. I think it's pretty much out of the question. I mean, you know, how many times has this happened? There are numerous vessels operating in the English Channel. How many of them have fired machine guns or some form of guns at yachts that are approaching them? Well, it's not happening, and it's, you know, if it had been anyone other than the Russians, then you might have possibly bought that explanation, possibly. But the Russians know this is definite intention and a definite way of trying to intimidate the British government into not doing any more boarding of the ghost ships, and you can see why that is, and you know, it's very obvious that Prime Minister Starmer very reluctantly ordered the boarding of that ship. He was worried about the consequences, what the consequences would be, but he balanced those potential consequences against the political advantage that would give him in boarding a ship just after the resignation of two ministers and just before the G7 and the NATO summits.
So what should he do now, do you think? How should he respond to this?
Well, I think he has to respond with strength. And of course, there are a number of things he can do, either one or more or all of them, which include, of course, summoning the Russian ambassador to the Foreign Office and giving him a dressing down, which is the most mild form of response to expelling Russian diplomats from London, to really stepping up, I think, maybe the number of warships in the English Channel, British warships. That's if we've got any that can deploy there, and increasing the number of these ghost vessels that are moving without any kind of interference through the channel. I think those things, you know, in other words, he has to do exactly the opposite of what President Putin wants him to do in this situation. There has to be some form of tough response, and I'm not talking at all about military action. In this case, I'm talking about diplomatic action and very clear signalling about our determination to get to grips with these ghost tankers.
Speaking of diplomatic action or indeed other action against Russia, we know that 2 Ukrainian men have been found guilty of setting those fires at Keir Starmer's house and to his car. He was subletting the property at the time to his sister-in-law. Very, very serious and very worrying attack. The 2 men who have been convicted are Ukrainian, but there is a lot of reporting and investigative reporting that points the finger to Russia. I wonder if you believe that. I wonder if that, in your view, is a manifestation of the threat from Russia as well.
I think it almost certainly is. And I know the police have said there's been no evidence to point towards a state, what they call a state threat, i.e. Russia. But I think it's got their fingerprints all over it. There's no question that they want to undermine Starmer, they want to undermine the UK, and these are the kind of tactics they would use. And as a minimum, they would have exploited what was going on. And the fact that they were Ukrainian, I think, is neither here nor there. The Russians use Ukrainians. They use criminal networks from various different countries in their aggressive actions against Britain and other European countries.
Speaking of big and important international affairs, Donald Trump now claims the Strait of Hormuz will fully reopen soon. He has insisted it'll remain toll-free. He's also said that agreements from bad people don't mean anything in regard to whether the Strait will stay open in future. Given what we know about the deal, or the sort of heads of agreement that are to be negotiated over the next 60 days, I wonder how much confidence you have in the deal that Donald Trump says has been done with Iran.
Well, I have complete confidence that the deal's been done, but I have no confidence in what that means. And I'm sure President Trump doesn't either. He's not a fool, and his people's advising him are not fools. They know what the Iranians' game is. It may well suit President Trump's purpose at the moment to play along with that game, but there will come a point, I think, when he has to take firm action again. Whatever the Iranians agree to, and of course we know, and it's a very old trick by them, we know that they're saying something quite different to what President Trump is saying and what the Pakistani mediators are saying, and the Iranians are talking about, yeah, we'll open the Straits of Hormuz under our terms. So they don't mean we will. That doesn't mean they'll give free passage. So I think we'll have to watch and see. But I don't have any confidence in any deal that the Iranians sign. And as I said, I don't think President Trump will have either, no matter what he might say.
Is Israel missing out in this deal, do you think? And does the complexity of the Lebanon aspect of this render any attempt for the United States and for Israel to speak with one voice redundant, especially as there have been some serious fissures between them recently?
Yeah, I'm not so sure about the serious fissures. I think that President Trump and Prime Minister Netanyahu are pretty close allies in this situation.
They've had a number of bad-tempered conversations, though, haven't they?
So we're here. But I think, I think that there's an element of, shall we say, role-playing in this situation, which doesn't necessarily reflect the reality of what's going on behind the scenes. Now, it may well be that this deal does not suit Israel in the same way as it may suit President Trump at the moment. That's probably true. But you're not going to see the two countries divided over that. And nor do I believe that President Trump is going to place the handcuffs on Prime Minister Netanyahu when it comes to dealing with Lebanon. He understands the threat from Lebanon. He knows that Israel can't tolerate that threat. And he might say something different. He might make remarks publicly, but it doesn't necessarily mean, they don't necessarily reflect exactly what's going on behind the scenes in those two capital cities.
More generally, I wonder if you worry, as I do, about the apparent decline in support from Israel from Republicans and people in America more generally. Is this something which just ebbs and flows and you're not worried about it? Or is it something where there is cause for concern?
No, I think there is cause for concern. Israel has enjoyed the closest relationship with the United States for many years, and I think still does. But there is that danger because the Democrats have long ago drifted away from Israel, and where they were close friends of Israel in the past, many of them have, not all, but many of them have turned on Israel. The Republicans is a different story. It is, I think, deeply concerning when we have a significant element of the Republican Party and Republican members turning a little bit against Israel. Maybe not too serious right now, but I think it could get that way unless something is done about it. And that really, I think, has got to lie within the Republican Party and President Trump as well.
Richard, as always, thank you. That's the former British Army Commander, Colonel Richard Kemp. Appreciate you joining us on Talk this evening. Mark in Lincolnshire has given me a ring about this Russian boat drama. 0344 499 1000 is the number he has called. Mark, you're very welcome to the programme. What would you like to say?
Hi there, Peter. Just war, eh? What's it good for? This just seems like just a constant escalation. We'll do something in return. They'll do something in return. It'll just escalate and escalate and escalate. And before you know it, they'll get what they finally want. Certainly what people like Richard Kemp want.
What does Richard Kemp want, do you think, when it comes to Russia?
He wants a war with Russia.
Really?
I've heard him many times. Yeah, I've heard him many times with Julia. He's well up for it, I think. Quite what he's having a war with.
Are you up for it? Do you think that's a good idea?
No, I don't. I think it's a joke. I think...
Surely we would lose it. Surely when you see what's happening in Ukraine, for example, although they've only taken a fifth of Ukraine. I mean, there is this idea that a lot of people put forward that the idea is kind of European dominance and a greater Russia. I just wonder what you think of that, Mark.
I think it's bunkum, to be honest. I don't think it really holds any water. If they wanted Ukraine as a whole, they've taken Ukraine as a whole.
But they do want Ukraine as a whole, and they haven't. They've only taken a fifth of Ukraine.
Yeah, why is that? They've only deployed X% of their military within Ukraine. They've never hit Ukraine with absolutely everything they've got to hit, non-nuclear, that is. As I say, if they really wanted it, they would have it.
So do you think this expansionism stuff is...
There's nothing that Europe would have been able to do about it, is there? At the end of the day, I mean, if you're talking about a Europe-wide war, then you've got something that's going to kill tens of millions of people, which seems to be something that people seem to want to do for some reason. Sam probably quite likes the idea because he wouldn't have to have an election, would he? I don't know. It just seems like the whole rhetoric for so long now has been Russia, 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 Russia. Russia's blamed for everything. I think
there are quite a number of other countries that are blamed for things too. Iran, for example, is clearly a major bogeyman for many people, and rightly so.
Yeah, and they still squeeze Russia into that, don't they? with oil, with the oil stuff. I mean, the whole thing. Intercepting that vessel. Yes, you could say it's because the defence secretaries and whatever that left at the weekend. That was the reason Starmer did it. But the reality is, hundreds, tens of thousands of these ghost vessels, these ghost tankers, have gone through the channel since the Ukraine war. This is the first one we've stopped.
Yeah,
why are we suddenly stopping it?
Well, I don't think that's a coincidence, Mark, and I think you and Richard Kemp may be as one on that. Steve's been in touch and says on the frigate, the yacht was radioed by the Russian warship, but it failed to respond and remained in the collision course of the Russian warship. Fired small arms to get their attention. Their attention was gained and the yacht changed course, says Steve. Certainly I did read that earlier on. I'm not disputing that, but there's more to this, certainly. Plenty more to discuss in the next hour. Stay with us.
across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Very good evening. Thanks so much for your company here in the Evening Exchange. I'm Peter Cardwell. Loads to discuss between now and 10 o'clock. I want to make sure I get as many people on the phone as possible. Do give me a ring, 0344 499 1000. We're going to be speaking to Sammy Woodhouse, who is a victim of rape gangs and was heavily involved in this big report that's out today. Rupert Lowe and his team have put it together, as have other MPs from different parties, as well the DUP and Conservatives. So we'll talk about that, what's in it and what the recommendations are. Sammy will bring us through that, as will Marlon West, who is the father of a grooming gang victim. We're going to speak to an 18-year-old as well about the social media ban. This is something that so many young people have opinions on. I wanted to hear from one of them, so we'll do that a little bit later this hour. We'll also talk about where Trump is and the US-Iran deal, where we are with it and where Trump is too. Obviously, it was his 80th birthday the other day. We've had the UFC fight and all the rest of it. So much to discuss. I want to discuss it with you. We're also getting many messages, and I'm sure you may want to add to that, on what has happened with Preston Davey, the baby who was murdered by his adoptive father. And the other adoptive father was found liable too. Absolutely dreadful. Yesterday was the largest single day this year for small boat crossings as well. And we are talking about the Russian tanker, the frigate, which had been which shot at warning shots anyway at a UK yacht in the Channel. So there's plenty about that. Loads to discuss. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. You can text me at 72222 with the words "talk" in your text. You can tweet me at talkTV. Follow me at Peter Cardwell. You can send me a WhatsApp text message or a voice note, or indeed give me a ring on the main number 0344 499 1000. Stay with us here on Talk. I should say that Duncan Barks is with you tomorrow, Thursday and Friday. I am taking a few days off, but I will be back on Monday at 7 o'clock. So I'm here till 10 tonight. Then we're all into cross-promotion at this company, and I'm going to be on Times Radio between 10:30 and 11 this evening, doing a paper review as I do every Tuesday night. So you can listen to me on that on Times Radio between 10:30 and 11. But I'm here, as I say, until 10. Petri Hoskin will take over between 10 and 1. And as I said, Duncan Barks is here Wednesday, tomorrow, Thursday and Friday, but I am back on Monday. Fear not, I'm just taking a few days off. Have had a few days off recently, but my holidays will then be over until the end of August, when I'm heading away for a couple of days to the Edinburgh Festival, which I'm very much looking forward to. I'll be hearing Jeff Norcott. He is the great comedian and indeed presenter on Times Radio, whose programme I also appear on from time to time as well. So listen, thank you so much for your support. We've been doing this Evening Exchange programme now for about 3.5 months, and we've had such an amazing reception. So many people getting in touch, and please do that. Whatever's on the tip of your tongue, 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. Ernie has sent me a WhatsApp on that number and says the left-wing blob that includes social services love to show off when they can get people that tick all the DEI boxes to foster or adopt. Nothing gives them more pleasure. It's a bit of a coup. The problem is, if it all goes pear-shaped, they will do whatever it takes not to admit they got it wrong and ignore obvious signs that something didn't look right. Kath says, I am sick to death of the term protected characteristics. In my opinion, it gives certain people carte blanche to do whatever they want with no consequences. As a white heterosexual woman, I have no get out of jail free card to play. Well, listen, nobody should be given a get out of jail free card. Nobody should be allowed in any way to say or do what they want, or to break rules, or to be given any special privileges simply because of the colour of their skin or their sexual orientation or whatever. I completely agree with Kath. It should just be a level playing field, and the fact that it isn't, and the fact that people are worried about raising problems and raising quibbles and also very, very serious issues, for example, when it came to baby Preston, simply because the fathers are gay, the adoptive fathers are gay. Well, that is something that I just think is absolutely disgusting, because essentially, if whether you're gay, straight, black, white, whatever, if a baby is being abused, well, that shouldn't even be in your head. It should be, how do we keep this baby safe? If we need to take this baby away from these people, we should do that. It is just disgraceful what happened. And this feeds into so many different areas of society as well. It feeds into the grooming gangs, the rape gangs, as they should be called. And that is what we're going to talk about now, because Rupert Lowe, along with a team of various people, including Sammy Woodhouse, who we're about to speak to, have been involved in this inquiry, in this non-statutory inquiry. It's out today. Some of the detail is really astonishing. That is there. The inquiry found evidence of how the police discouraged victims, destroyed evidence, in some cases were active members of the network. Social care placed children into homes that became hubs for traffickers. The NHS failed to act on obvious signs of sexual abuse and even sent children back to their abusers. Schools ignored clear safeguarding concerns and instead punished and excluded victims. The inquiry found evidence that the same unspeakable crimes occurred in at least 149 local authority districts, close to 40% of all such districts across the United Kingdom, just council districts there. Sammy Woodhouse is with me now. She's a rape gang inquiry lead and a survivor. Marlon West joins me too. He's a father of a survivor and involved in the inquiry. Marlon, we'll come to you in a second. But Sammy, I just want to speak to you first and say well done on what you've done. Tell us what conclusions you've come to, what you've unearthed, and what needs to be done now.
Well, what we've found is that children across the United Kingdom have been trafficked, not all over, not just all of the United Kingdom, but outside of the UK as well. So children have been raped, tortured, murdered. They was forced into slavery, into child marriage. There was even social workers that attended those marriages. Children weren't just raped by gangs, they were raped by police officers. So, you know, children in the United Kingdom were raped by the state. The people that were paid to protect didn't. And this weren't just by police officers, we're talking about all services. The, you know, NHS, policing, social care, the schools, everybody knew. And not just, you know, within local councils or local government, but this went all the way to the top, right to the Home Office. Now it shows as well that they've known since as early as the 1990s that they knew their entire operations, what hotels they were getting taken to, what taxis, what the locations were, who the perpetrators were and who the victims were. It's absolutely horrific. Children have been impregnated, STIs, backstreet abortions, left with long life trauma. Many, in fact, majority of perpetrators are still out there on the streets. Majority of perpetrators were Pakistani Muslim. Majority are white children. There's a minimum of probably about 250,000 children. This has been happening to mostly girls. However, we have spoken to boys. Our inquiry welcomed anyone, you know, both genders, you know, people of different races, religions, survivors, parents, whistleblowers, professionals. There was nothing off limits. And we made sure that we put a clear focus on race and religion because, as we know, for decades, in fact, you know, the report goes back to as early as the 1950s, people shied away from this crime because majority were committed by Pakistani Muslim men. They didn't want to be called racist or Islamophobic.
When you say nothing's off limits, do you have confidence that the statutory inquiry, the government inquiry into this will have nothing off limits? Just in I read the executive summary. I'm afraid I haven't read every single word of the report, although I intend to do so. What has been written in there is really quite direct, and rightly so. I'm not criticising it, I'm merely pointing out that it is very direct when it comes to the Islamic faith, discussions and justifications that are given in the Quran. Obviously, that activity can never be justified, but there are. It is very, very specifically linked to the texts that were used there, and we know that that has happened time and time again. Can you see the statutory inquiry going down that same route?
No, but what I do think is that our inquiry have now put a lot of pressure on them to do that. Now, our inquiry were only set up because, you know, the government didn't want to do a national inquiry. Now, I'm not surprised that Labour government don't want to do one. You've got to remember, children were being raped on, in their councils. Now, when I exposed the Rotherham child abuse scandal, I named a Labour politician who's a relative of my rapist called Jahangir Akhtar. Him and PC Hassan Ali were doing no prosecution deals with him. So as we said earlier, we know that police are involved, but you have Labour, that they know this has been happening under their watch. So of course they don't want a national inquiry, but the Conservatives are no better either. They did very little. Then you've got, of course, Reform that are saying they're all going to do something if you vote for them and if they come elected. All political parties should put their differences to one side and put the children at the forefront. And that's why I respect Rupert, because he's just got on with it. He set up the inquiry. It is funded by the public. I think about 20,000 donors. And next stages, because our work does not stop here, the next stages we are going to be naming people and we're going to be bringing private prosecutions. If the state don't want to act, we will.
Tell me, you've been absolutely straightforward, as has Rupert Lowe and as has the executive summary of this report, in regard to the race and background of those who are responsible. Can you just tell me about your interview with Good Morning Britain?
Yeah, so I was on a live interview this morning with Good Morning Britain, and before I went on the show, I was briefed not to talk about race. Now, of course, I didn't listen to that person, and I actually said to him, I said, why is that? And he said, oh, it's for legal reasons. And I said, but it's been proven in courts of law and in multiple reports that majority of the perpetrators were Pakistani Muslim. And he said, oh, it's to do with the Ofcom, and started waffling. So when I went on to GMB, I did speak about that. And what I expressed was how damaging it could be and how disrespectful it is to say to a survivor and to a person that spent 14 years of exposing this and be to absolute hell and back for doing so, to say that I'm not allowed to talk about his race or their race. Were they, was anyone trying to protect me when I was being targeted for my race and when, hundreds of thousands of children were being targeted for their race? Because let me tell you what was happening in my child protection meetings back in 1999. They was bringing professionals in to ensure that professionals weren't racist to him. It's always them that are being protected. And I've had enough. And you'll know this yourself as a journalist, mainstream media are very, very powerful. You guys have got the platform to help change
and that's why we need to
country.
tell the truth. Just speaking of Good Morning Britain, I understand you've now received an apology from them. Is that correct?
I have, yeah.
Okay.
Well, I think you should be sacked.
Okay, well, we've actually put in a call to Good Morning Britain and to their press office at ITN as well for that, and if they get back to us, whether it's today or another day, we will of course read that out and let them have their say. Sammy, just stay where we are just for the meantime. I just want to bring in Marlon West. I'll let you have the final say in a second, Sammy, but I want to bring in Marlon West, who's the father of a survivor. You're involved with the inquiry as well, Marlon. What hopes do you have for the recommendations of the inquiry to be carried out? Very interesting to see that a new Childhood Sexual Exploitation Act must be passed. That's your conclusion, creating for the first time a specific criminal offence of organised group-based child sexual exploitation with mandatory minimum sentences. Tell us about that.
So what I want to come from the inquiry is, and I'm very clear on this, I've been talking about this for the last 2 or 3 years, is prosecutions of professionals. A lot of the time when media go to services for a right to reply, they'll talk about human error. This isn't human error. This is clear cover-up. And yeah, my case and my daughter is exactly the same as all the other survivors we've interviewed, that services have let the girls down. And I'm not just talking social services, police, education, NHS. Now, if this prosecution is put in place of professionals who clearly know that grooming is happening, we use them as an example, this will stop.
And how far are you going to go with that, without naming names, because I'm sure you have legalities to go through and all the rest of that? Yeah. Where roughly are you going to start? What's the next step in all of this?
So I guess Sammy's just spoke about that. That'll be the second part of the inquiry.
Yeah, and you have money left to do that, don't you? Because all of this is very expensive.
We do, and also, this is in the social media. Elon Musk has also offered to pay for prosecutions. That needs to happen. Once that happens, and professionals are being prosecuted, I do think this will seriously help. And also, we need professionals to acknowledge that children are being raped by Muslim raping gangs, which is the big elephant in the room that everybody's terrified of saying, because, and I kind of get it, because nobody wants to lose their job for being called out racist. This isn't racist. This is factual information. And it's just become a virus across the country.
Marlon, just finally for you, I want to ask you the same question I asked Sammy, and then I want to give her the final word on this. When the statutory inquiry finally gears up and finally does what it's meant to do, or is in gear anyway, do you feel its conclusions will be the same? Will they be as blunt and as straightforward as what you and your team have said here, Marlon?
So are you talking about our inquiry?
No, the statutory inquiry, the government inquiry.
Absolutely not. I have no faith in that. My daughter's involved with that. Obviously, she speaks to me. I think, if I'm honest with you, it'll be wokey. They've already been dragging their feet on that. When it comes out, it'll be possibly past the general election, so it won't be Labour's responsibility. I have absolutely no faith in that.
Okay. Marlon, thank you. That's Marlon West, the father of a survivor involved in the, and he was involved in the inquiry himself. Sammy, just want to give you the final word to you. What would you say to anybody out there now who's concerned this is still going on? We know it's still going on. What would you say to them in order to try to stop it now and to get justice for people like you when it comes to historical events?
It is still definitely going on, and people say it takes a village to raise a child. That's not true. It takes a country to raise a child. Every single person has got a responsibility in this country to protect our children, to protect the next generation. I can't be saved. It was too late for me. I've got, probably the most amount of justice I'm going to get, but we can protect children, but we all have to come together and do it.
What do you think the 14-year-old Sammy Woodhouse would make of you now?
I think she'd be proud. But I think, if you look at what I've achieved and overcome, going through everything that I've been through, can you imagine what kind of life and what I could have been capable of without my trauma?
It's a very, very good point, and one that will stay with me, as will so much of what you and Marlon have said this evening. Thank you for speaking to me. Good luck with this and the prosecutions you're going to bring. I hope we speak again on that. Sammy Woodhouse there, a rape gang inquiry lead, a survivor herself. She was just 14 when that terrible abuse happened to her. Marlon West is the father of a survivor. Brilliant documentary, actually, that he was involved with, and Maggie Oliver as well on Channel 4. And not a couple of years ago, I think, less than a couple of years ago, that he was involved with. He first came to my attention, spoke very, very honestly about how he really tried to keep his daughter away from those gangs. She kept getting more and more folded into them. Absolutely dreadful. After the break, we're going to speak to a young person about a different matter, actually. We're going to speak to an 18-year-old about the social media ban. Last night, I think we heard from the experts. I just wanted to hear from a young person who would be affected by this, and him and his mates are going to be affected by this. We're also going to take your calls as well, so please do lift the phone. Let me know your thoughts. 0344 499 1000. Stay with us.
We've got some breaking news that has just come in. talkSPORT have announced a brand new partnership in a developing story. We hear they've created So Good Lager right in time for football's big summer. Just in, we're hearing that So Good Lager will be pouring pints across all O'Neill's pubs and some of the best sports pubs across the UK. With the big kickoff just around the corner, you can find out where to get your hands on a fresh pint of So Good Lager at talksport.com/lager.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Well, thank you to everybody who has been in touch, including Carol in Liverpool, who wants to talk about baby Preston. She says the adoptive parents of Preston Davy are two scumbags. I would call them what I really think of them, but I would be banned from here forever. I hope they get a hard time in prison. Elle has said, one of my favourite guests is Colonel Richard Kemp on Peter Cardwell's Evening Exchange on Talk. His analysis is so clear on every topic. Glad to be seeing more of him lately. Yeah, certainly he's a busy boy, but we try and get Colonel Richard Kemp on as often as we can, because he really does speak a lot of sense, and he just cuts through the nonsense and has the experience, certainly at that very high level in the military as a colonel, to actually tell us what's going on properly. Les says, given the report into rape gangs released today, I endorse Elon Musk's comments that all involved throughout the United Kingdom, including those who covered up the scandal in every area of public life, must be sought out, prosecuted and pay a very heavy penalty indeed. Time to clean up our society without fear or favour. In fact, those in high positions should be given even more lengthy sentences. And Steve says the rape gang scandal goes right to the heart of government. We need to see government officials held to account and dragged through the courts. So lots to discuss on all of that. I want to speak a little bit about social media now, and actually last night we spoke to quite a number of experts and various people on what young people will be thinking and feeling. I thought, let's speak to a young person. Let's speak to someone who's just turned 18 actually. His name is Nathan Zaruvabeli, on how the social media ban is going down amongst his peers and generations. Nathan, good to talk to you, and thank you for joining us this evening. What do you think of this, of what's proposed? You're a little bit older than the 16-year-olds who will, and younger, who will have a total ban. 16, 17, there'll be partial bans. What do you think of this? What's your opinion, and what have your friends have been saying about it?
I think this is a grave mistake, because from my experiences with social media from back when I was 14, 15, 16, they were some of the best years of my life, because I got to connect with people my age online. We got to play games, and at the same time I also used it as a very good tool to revise. And I'm also hearing from people younger than me that they know how to bypass this. So they are already downloading VPNs, and it's very simple to get past this. We've had the Online Safety Act through, and we've seen many people go past this already.
Yeah, it's really interesting that there are lots of people who can get past it, and actually if the sort of father or mother or whoever is logged in, they can just do it on their account when it comes to YouTube. If you hadn't had social media, how would your teenage years have been different? Because Keir Starmer says this will allow people to go out and play with their friends, to be more imaginative, to read books, to do things that kids are meant to be doing, but maybe you disagree with that.
Yeah, I do disagree with that. I think that, I mean, I grew up under COVID, so social media was the best way for me to speak to my friends. We got to play video games online, and at the same time, I felt like we had, had a way of escapism from the lockdown. So I just wonder what would happen to so many other kids, what they're going to do now without it.
Yeah, you can, of course, still communicate on things like WhatsApp, for example, but it's interesting that I think a lot of people demonise things like YouTube and social media and say it's all bad, but as you say, it helped you revise. There were lots of things that you could look up and that it instructed you and helped you to do.
Yeah, I mean, for example, YouTube, I use for my GCSEs a lot to watch English lessons, which if I hadn't had social media, I would have had to get a tutor, and it would have been a lot more expensive. And loads of other kids who aren't in such a fortunate position to get a tutor, and I just can't help to think what would happen to them if they didn't have it.
Did your parents put any restrictions on what you could see or not see, Nathan?
No, not particularly. I actually put myself restrictions on sometimes on Instagram so that I don't scroll for too long, and I feel like that's.
Did you stick to it? Did you stick to it?
Sometimes I do, sometimes I don't. Yeah.
Yeah, it's funny. And what sort of conversations did you have with your parents about social media? Did they kind of understand what you were looking at and why it was useful in your view?
I think they trusted me to use social media. I also think it's at a certain age. I don't think 16. I think 16 is way too old to not be on social media. But they trusted me in it, and they know. They also, as I first got a phone when I was 11, they told me the problems of social media, what to be aware of, what not to give information to, and just general stuff like that.
Mm. And were your friends as savvy as you were, and realise that actually there are people who very sadly want to speak to 13 and 14-year-olds and don't have good intentions towards them?
I think across the board, everyone found it all right. Everyone knew what not to go on and what to go on, and who to speak to and who not to speak to.
Yeah. OK, Nathan, really interesting to talk to you, and thanks for joining us on the Evening Exchange. That's Nathan Zarufabelli on how the social media ban is going down. He's just turned 18, so until a couple of weeks ago he would have been affected by it, and of course knows and has gone through his teenage years far more recently than anybody else I've been speaking to in the last couple of days. Whatever you think about that, maybe you're Nathan's age or even younger, and if you are under 18, you can come on this programme, but you do need parental permission to do so. So if you're one of those people and you have a perspective on this, maybe you agree with Nathan, maybe you don't agree, 0344 499 1000, or maybe you want to respond to something that Sammy or Marlon was saying there as well. George says, are we seriously supposed to believe that Russian intelligence services don't know where Starmer lives? I don't think we are. I don't think anybody's suggesting that, George, but it's an interesting one nonetheless. Peter, are you related to Nathan? Your hair is the same, says Richard. No, I'm not related to Nathan. I've never met Nathan, I'm afraid. But it seems to have reasonable hair, I suppose. I didn't really think about it, to be brutally honest. Deborah says, regarding the baby, the excuse is that there is no communication between different departments. Surely a baby's name is in the computer, you read the notes, and a red alert should appear on the screen the minute you have a second of concern at the hospital regarding baby Preston. There is no need for endless meetings in this day and age, says Deborah. And Debbie in Birmingham has some thoughts on baby Preston as well, the abused baby who was shamefully treated, and we know that his murderer and the partner who's guilty of a number of other offences related to this have been convicted and will be sentenced on Thursday. I hope to throw the book at them. Debbie's in Birmingham has some thoughts on this. Thanks for giving me a ring on 0344 499 1000, Debbie. What do you think?
Hi, evening, Peter. How are you?
I'm very well, thanks. What are your thoughts?
I just picked up the phone because you said something that someone said to you earlier about it's because they're gay people. Really?
Well, I do think that there is evidence that people were saying, were reluctant anyway. It's interesting, about an hour ago, we spoke to someone who knows the social work system very well and said, look, these were, quote-unquote plausible people. One of them was a teacher. There were, middle-class people who wanted to adopt, and there's a prejudice to kind of believe those people when they say, oh, he fell, or there's an injury here, and that just absolutely shouldn't be part of this at all.
Well, I'm a backup foster carer, so's my husband, and you get all walks of life that want to foster or adopt children, but I really don't think it should be down to your race, religion, colour of your skin, or your sexual orientation, to be fair. But it was just my ears pricked up when I just heard something about gay people, and I was like, well, what's wrong with gay people?
There's absolutely nothing wrong with gay people at all, Debbie. The point, I suppose, is that sometimes what happens is that people don't want to be labelled homophobic. Sometimes when black people are accused of racism, or people who aren't white are accused of racism, for example, people don't want to point that out because they don't want to be accused of being racist themselves. I suppose a part of it is not wanting to say things because you might be accused of being prejudiced yourself. But no, listen, I totally am in favour of gay people adopting. There are many brilliant gay foster and adoptive parents. In fact, I had a cup of tea yesterday with a really good friend who he and his husband have adopted 2 children, and they're absolutely thriving and doing really well.
Exactly. And you've got single parents that adopt or foster. I just really think we shouldn't be labelling people and putting people in little boxes, because I call him my son from another mum. He'd be the same age as my son if he was still alive. And he's with his partner, Cameron, and they're thinking about fostering or adopting. And I really don't think just because they're gay that...
No, absolutely not. Listen, anybody from any background, single people adopt as well, and that's a wonderful thing as well. And anybody who says that single people shouldn't adopt or gay people shouldn't adopt or whatever, people in all sorts of different relationships, I just say, right, would you rather have those people in care homes? Would you rather say to those 80,000 children who are in the care system, actually, no, we don't want you to have a family that loves you? Families come in all shapes and sizes, don't they, Debbie?
Exactly. And at the end of the day, little people, going back to this poor child, little people from the life I've had growing up, you should be able to enjoy your childhood and then flourish into having a great, hopefully, long future.
Totally.
Stuff like this shouldn't happen.
So you're a foster carer yourself?
I'm not a foster carer, I'm a backup foster carer. So one of my very good friends is a foster carer, and we are the go-to if they need sort of respite or need time away or they've got to go somewhere quickly. So me and my husband, we step in and we look after the foster children. She has 6.
So what's that like? Did you have to go through a lot of checks for that, or what happened?
100%. You have to do skills for foster. They have to do in-depth checks into you. I do agree with what someone said earlier. We've got enhanced DBS checks. My husband has to do several of them because of the job he does. You have to have different ones for different things you do. But like what your person said earlier, they're just a bit like an MOT. That's where you are today. Doesn't mean you're going to do something wrong the next day. But it's great to go in and look after them and be with them and just make sure that they're all happy and stuff. It's very sad to hear sometimes what they've all been through. But you just try and crack on and look after them because they're entitled to have a good, happy life.
Of course. What do you think about adopting from abroad? That's a controversial issue for some people. That still goes on when there are, 80,000 kids in the care system in England alone who need adoptive and foster parents, and the demand, brilliant people like you and your husband, Debbie, who volunteer and help. There just aren't enough people, and it's a very, very difficult thing to do. I'm sure you get great rewards from it, but it's nonetheless a difficult thing, I'm sure.
I think the system makes it very difficult for you to try and do stuff like that here, because you do have to jump through a lot of hoops, and you do get people sort of like delve into your life, which they should do, and sometimes you get a no. So I think maybe that's why people do adopt abroad, because they seem to think it's easier. But I agree with you. There's a hell of a lot of children in this country, no matter their background, colour, creed, religion, whatever. They just need a safe home. And if you've got good people out there and they have been checked and they are monitored, that are prepared to do that, get them out of the care homes, because I can't imagine anything worse than being at school 24/7, because that's pretty much what I think a care home's like.
It's a very, very good point, actually, and there are a lot of... I've been in some meetings. As you may know, I am a sort of what's called an independent visitor, a sort of mentor for a young man. He's not a child anymore. He's not a teenager anymore. In fact, we're actually coming to the end of it now because he's 21, and we have our final visit in a couple of weeks' time. And so much of his life is like really formal stuff, and so much of it is sitting in meetings, adults, and all the rest of it. And that's not fun. He wanted to be playing with his PlayStation or going out and outside or whatever. Debbie, when you do hear that story of baby Preston, what goes through your mind, especially when you know there are so many good adoptive parents out there, and very sadly there are a few who should be nowhere near children at all?
Well, it makes me sick because my son was taken from me in 2001. And you just sit there and think, if you've got the opportunity to have a child in your life and give them everything, which I had, I'm pretty sure you did as well, and many other people in this country, a good family environment, and you just get to go to school, you come home, you do something fun, and you just have a good life. No matter how much money you've got, it doesn't matter. You can just give these people love. To do that to them is disgusting. Sorry. I just think that's wrong.
You don't have to apologise at all, Debbie. I totally agree with everything you've said. Listen, it's entirely up to you whether you tell us or not, and please don't. Please just say, I'd rather not talk about it if you'd rather not talk about it. But what happened in 2001?
So I went full term with my son. He was due on the 10th of August 2001. He was born on the 8th of August, and sadly the hospital he was born in, I don't even know what the registrar took his life in her own hands, and she caused him to have a brain hemorrhage, a stroke, and fractured his skull. So if he had survived, he wouldn't be like a normal child, I guess you would call it. But yes. So, yeah, she took my son's life into her own hands. And sadly, when I met my husband, I said to him, if you think we're going to go anywhere in the future, don't expect to have a family, because that's not going to happen. He was like, that's a bit heavy. But at least I was honest. But, yeah, I couldn't go through that again, because the last thing I was told when I left the hospital was, we'll see you in 9 months. And I never went back.
Goodness me. Well, Debbie, listen, thank you for speaking really honestly from the heart. And listen, I'm so sorry that that happened to you. And I wish you well. And really, I mean, I really admire you for what you've told us this evening, and especially being a backup foster care. I'm sure your friends are incredibly grateful for you, and you're giving a really good example to those kids who have had, you know, there are so many adults who have let those children down, who are being looked after by your excellent friends. There's so many adults who've let them down, and you're absolutely not one of them, and your husband is not one of them either. You're people who are there for them, and rightly so. And that's a big commitment.
Just give little people a chance, because I'm pretty sure you come from a great background.
Yeah, very lucky to do so.
My parents. Yeah, just give little people a chance. They're entitled to the same upbringing we've had. Not everyone is lucky, like I said, money or wherever they live or whatever. But just give them a chance. Don't do this to them. That's just wrong.
Thank you, Debbie. Really, really interesting to talk to you, and thank you for your call. There's a lot of what quite a number of people have said to me on the programme tonight that's going to stay with me for a while, and that was just a really honest call from Debbie. My goodness, I'm really quite affected by it. We're going to talk in just a second about Donald Trump and the US and Iran. We'll take more of your calls right up to 10 o'clock if you want to join Debbie on the air, if you want to tell me your story, or just give me your opinion. Whatever you want to say, right up to 10 o'clock, please do give me a shout. 0344 499 1000.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Well, interestingly, we've been hearing about Prime Minister Keir Starmer today, and actually was interviewed by our stablemates over at Times Radio a little bit earlier on today. I just want to play a little bit of this clip. It was an interview with Anna Mihailova, who is their political editor, and the Prime Minister Keir Starmer was asked about what would happen if there was a leadership election, and obviously Andy Burnham running in Makerfield on Thursday against lots of other parties. It'll be very interesting to see what happens, but the Prime Minister was asked specifically if there is a leadership contest, what will happen, and this is what he told Times Radio earlier today.
Look, I don't think there should be a contest. If there is a contest, I intend to be in it and to fight it.
Is the danger that you look like you've got your head in the sand on this?
I don't think being at the G7 talking about the Iran deal, which is going to have a profound impact on our economy, on households up and down the country, who know when they go to the petrol pumps that it's affecting them. I don't think they would say anything other. I would expect you to be there with world leaders, alleviating the pressure on my family. Equally on Ukraine, which is now in its 4.5 years, people would say, I expect you to be involved in that. On top of that, by the way, I'd gently point out that when we started 2 years ago in 2012, 2024, I said we're going to both invest in our public services and we're going to grow our economy. And many people said to me, that's not possible, you'll have to choose one or the other. Here we are 2 years in, we've got massive investment in our NHS, waiting lists coming down, biggest drop in 17 years just the other week. And think about all the people that are affected by that, whose lives will be better as a result of that. At the same time, our growth figures are better than expected, and in fact the best in the G7. So every time, when I took over the party, people said it's not possible to turn it around. When we got towards the general election, they said it's not possible for Labour to win a general election. When we won the general election, they said it's not possible to grow the economy and invest in your public services.
That was Keir Starmer speaking to Anna Mihailova, who is the political editor of Times Radio. And speaking of Times Radio, in just about an hour's time, in fact just less than an hour, at 10:30, I'll be doing their paper review, so you can listen to that if you want to. We'll be talking a bit about the Makerfield by-election as well this week. We're talking about Andy Burnham and all the rest of it. And just to keep us on the right side of electoral law, I'm just going to give you the candidates that are standing on Thursday in Makerfield. Of course, there'll be full coverage of that result on Friday on Talk. Jake Austin is standing for the Liberal Democrats, Count Binface for the Count Binface Party, Andy Burnham for the Labour Party, Dan Clark for the Libertarian Party, John Dyer is an independent, Ed Gemmell for the Climate Party, Paul Gould is an independent, Alan Howling Lord Hope for the official Monster Raving Loony Party, Robert Kenyon for Reform UK, Robert Pownall for Protect the Wild, Rebecca Shepherd for Restore Britain, Sarah Wakefield for the Green Party, Peter Ward for Rejoin EU, and Michael Winstanley for the Conservative Party. But let's cross the Atlantic now to talk about Donald Trump insisting that an Iran deal will open the Strait of Hormuz toll-free. He is meeting world leaders. In fact, let's go back across the Atlantic to where Trump actually is, which is, of course, Evian for the G7. So we've crossed the Atlantic twice in that link there. But interestingly, his comments on Netanyahu have been very, very scratchy. We'll get into that in just a second. Let's speak to Greg Swenson, who's the chairman of Republicans Overseas UK, on what this deal is saying. Do you have confidence, as the president has, that this initial agreement, Greg, will actually turn in 60 days' time to a proper and lasting peace?
Yeah, I'm pretty confident this time around. And I think it shows you that the president was not willing to sign or enter a negotiation on a bad deal, because every time the regime refused to accommodate, he would send in not the B-2s, but he'd send in some fighter jets, or he'd send in some, some other sort of kinetic action. And so I don't think it was only a week ago, the last kinetic action. So I don't think he would tolerate anything but a good deal for the U.S. and a good deal for the world.
Yeah, it's interesting that Trump has said the agreements from bad people do not mean anything. So clearly he's a little bit skeptical with some of this anyway.
Yeah, he should be. I mean, look, the regime has a reputation of negotiating and entering agreements like the JCPOA and not cooperating and not actually, abiding by the agreement. And so, yeah, I think he's right to be skeptical. It's going to be all about enforcement and inspections, some things that we haven't done in the past. So I think it's really critical, and everything is going to be subject to good behavior.
Greg, it's really interesting that he seems to be falling out with Netanyahu all over the place, diminishing the importance of the Israeli-Hezbollah conflict, calling on Netanyahu to be more responsible, and appeared to accuse him of using disproportionate force. You don't have to knock down an apartment house every time you're looking for somebody, Trump said. If Israel can't do the job without killing everyone else, Syria will do the job, referring to the Syrian President Ahmed al-Sharaa. It's interesting that he said al-Sharaa had, unlike Netanyahu, dealt with Hezbollah more quickly in Syria. Now, previously, he said they have an unbelievable relationship. I just wonder what you think about the relationship between Trump and Netanyahu as we speak.
Yeah, I think it's a speed bump, because since he made those comments, he's also come out and said, I have a great relationship with the prime minister, and he has every right to defend himself. So I think it was a small speed bump. I also think it's all about timing. And, the president surely doesn't discourage Israel from defending itself, except when he was on the final day of negotiating. This would be on Saturday or Sunday. And so I think it was just a very delicate time. So he would have appreciated, some moderation and maybe, okay, defend yourself, but not today. Can you just give me 24 hours? So, I think that's just a small speed bump. I think it's more the other leadership in Israel it came out sort of critical of this deal, even though we haven't seen it yet. But I do think they're also positioning themselves so that they're in a good position over the next 60 days to get some leverage in the negotiations.
I just wonder more broadly within the Republican movement and indeed in America, what your sense is of support for Israel. We spoke to Colonel Richard Kemp a little bit earlier, former commander of the British Army, and I just wonder, he is quite worried, as am I actually, at how younger Americans in particular just don't seem to be as pro-Israel as older Americans. The MAGA movement's maybe part of that as well. I just wonder what your evaluation of that is, Greg.
Yeah, it's troubling, Peter. It's a great question because it's true. And, you're seeing some, of course, the radical left and most of the left is anti-Israel and anti-Semitic, but it's more worrisome when I see it on the right. And look, some of that's just, natural isolationism or, being against forever wars, all that stuff that, much of the MAGA movement has embraced and in many cases for the right reasons. But I do think it's spilled over a bit into, sort of anti-Israel sentiment, or at least, hey, listen, that's not our problem, that kind of attitude. I think that can change. I think, we were already seeing a change in the U.S. with the universities pushing back against anti-Semitism. You're seeing, a lot of support from most of the Republican Party. And funny enough, the MAGA wing, it's not 100% behind the war. I surely wouldn't argue that, but they're the bigger supporters of this conflict and of what the president is doing than, the so-called country club Republicans, which are, have been a little bit more suspicious or skeptical of it. So, look, I think everybody will come around, especially when we see the outcomes. Right now, it's very delicate. But if we see the right outcomes, I think people will surround around the president on this and also come back to Israel.
Greg, thank you. That's Greg Swenson there. He's the chairman of Republicans Overseas UK. I appreciate you joining us on the programme this evening. Peter has been in touch and says Raja Mia and Maggie Oliver work tirelessly on this issue, supporting victims who are still being targeted. I donated to Rupert Lowe's inquiry and applaud the efforts of all involved, especially the victims reliving such harrowing life experiences. But it was a contentious decision to release the report during a by-election week. As a supporter, I would have preferred a long overdue report about devastating harm to children to be centre stage and free of politics. Difficult and a heartbreaking subject handled beautifully, Peter. Sorry, that's Chris who says that. Apologies. It wasn't Peter. She was referring to me in the final bit. I read that incorrectly. So thank you, Chris. Really appreciate that. Gareth in Royal Berkshire says, can I just say Debbie, who spoke so movingly just a few minutes ago, can I just say Debbie is not alone, says Gareth. Been through similar myself. I'm so glad she has been strong and used it as a positive, exactly how I have tried. Always said it's better it happened to me rather than someone who maybe couldn't deal with it as well. I wish her all the love and have so much respect for her, says Gareth in Royal Berkshire. Well, I have plenty of respect for you as well, Gareth, for sending that in, for being so honest and talking about it and doing that to a national audience, and thank you for that. And it is an incredible privilege to do this programme and to talk to people all the time, people like Debbie, people like Gareth and others as well, people like Sammy, who've been through such dreadful, dreadful things, who tell you their stories and are so open about it, and I never ever lose sight of that. It's a privilege to do this job, and as long as I'm in this chair, everyone will be welcome here who has a story to tell and who wants to say what they want to say. Obviously we will disagree with some of it, but we disagree without being disagreeable. We'll take a couple of callers next. We'll also talk to Petri Hoskin about what's on her programme. She's here between 10 and 1. Stay with us here on Talk.
we've got some breaking news that has just come in. talkSPORT have announced a brand new partnership in a developing story. We hear they've created So Good Lager right in time for football's big summer. Just in, we're hearing that So Good Lager will be pouring pints across all O'Neill's pubs and some of the best sports pubs across the UK. With the big kickoff just around the corner, you can find out where to get your hands on a fresh pint of So Good Lager at talksport.com/lager.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Thank you to everybody who has been in touch, including Angie, who says, excellent call from Debbie. Much empathy shown from you, Peter. Angie, thank you for that. I really appreciate the lovely message, and really interesting to hear from you, and thank you for that. And indeed, everybody who's been in touch. We'll read out some more messages in a second, but I want to take calls from Grace. And first of all, Ken in Cardiganshire, who has some thoughts on the baby who was murdered. Ken, you're very welcome to the programme.
Hi, Peter. What really annoys me is the category of the actions that these two perverts covered with this child are exactly the same categories that pervert, Hugh Edwards, covered in his trial, and he was convicted of.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting that, of course, is only part of their conviction, those child pornography category A images, the worst kind of images. They were, of course, convicted of much. I mean, that is a very serious crime, as you correctly say, Ken. I'm not diminishing that for a second. But they were also convicted of much more serious crimes as well, including murder and allowing a murder. Yeah, exactly. But Edwards is still walking free, and Edwards has still got his money. Yeah, I mean, many people think he should have gone to prison as a result of that. Varley was found guilty of murder, assault by penetration, child cruelty, sexual assault of a child, and making and distributing indecent photos. I mean, it's only the final one of those, of making and distributing indecent photos, that Hugh Edwards was found guilty of. Yeah, but Edwards still had the intent, didn't he? He still had the images. He still had the intent. And I think I don't know, obviously, but had he had the opportunity, I think he may well have carried it out. Well, we don't know that. And in fairness, he hasn't been, right. And he wasn't convicted of that, Ken. And I'm not standing up for Hugh Edwards at all. I think he's a horrible person. But as you say, just a lot of people feel that he should have gone to prison as a result of that. Ken, listen, thanks for your call. Or do you have an extra point to make, Ken? I don't want to cut you off. No, that's it. Great show. Thank you. Thank you, Ken. Much appreciated. Final call this evening from Grace, who is in West London. Grace, you're very welcome. What would you like to say?
Hi. I think it's really good and important that there is nuanced discussion and scrutiny around the issues that were being discussed earlier relating to Islam and certain scriptures. I remember in university I had a really great conversation with some Muslims who'd set out some leaflets, and we had a lot in common. You know, we agreed that science suggests that a God exists, so we were kind of sharing that in common. And then I asked them why they didn't believe any of the eyewitnesses who'd seen Jesus resurrected, and they didn't really have an answer for that. But it was really good to find those points of commonality, and I think that part of the problem that we have with regard to this grooming gang situation is that we want to overgeneralize everything because our world is so complicated. So there are some people on the left who just presume that all Muslims are great and all Muslims should be defended. And then you've got other people who are saying all Muslims are bad. And in reality, Muslim human beings are so endlessly varied. And I think that there are some things within Islamic scriptures that are of real concern so far as I have seen. But we should be able to talk about those points of concern without then presuming that all people who are Muslim are following those or even know about them, to be honest.
Totally agree. I mean, there's a lot in Christianity that loads of people who are, you know, very observant Christians don't know. Not everybody can be a complete scholar of every single thing. But it is interesting, Grace, isn't it, that there were people using Quranic verses to actually justify, not that they can ever be justified, what they were doing. And I do think that, you know, scripture interpretation, we talked about it before, and there are lots of different ways that scripture is interpreted, but clearly there is a problem here.
I think that there is, so far as I've heard from various ex-Muslims. It was interesting she mentioned Ayan Hirsi Ali, because she's had a really interesting journey. She was a Muslim and then she became an atheist and a friend of Dawkins, and now she's become a Christian. But what I've heard from various ex-Muslims is that, in their view, there are things in some of the scriptures, and I think things that Muhammad did specifically that are of concern. And by contrast, Christianity is to follow Christ, who behaved very differently from Muhammad. But we can recognise those things without then actually making presumptions about all Muslim people. Because most people who are Muslim are just born into Islam, and they actually are, for the most part, really trying to do good things in our society. So we need to look in detail at the real issues rather than overgeneralising, because it's so easy to generalise when everything around...
Totally agree, and that's why we need nuance, and that's why we need to discuss these things. Grace, great call, lots in that, appreciate that. Lots of common sense, more of common sense coming from Petri Hoskin. Hello.
Oh, I'm not sure about common sense.
Well, we'll see.
Common sense isn't very common, is
I'll tell you at 1:01.
Okay, thanks.
What's coming up in your show?
Right, well, apparently on Friday, the Strait of Hormuz is going to be completely open with no tolls, and oil prices are going to crash all over the world. It's going to be brilliant.
It's all going to be marvellous. Everything's going to be great. You going to go there on your holidays,
yeah, I'm going to fly all around the world just because I can.
Yep.
But actually, it was going to speaking to a global supply, trade and maritime specialist to see really what, because she's been in touch with the ships today, a lot of the ships that are in there, are stuck in the strait at the moment.
And some of the sailors have had an awful time, haven't they? Dreadful time, running out of supplies and dealing with all sorts of things.
There's no way they're going to move.
Yeah.
Then just not.
Well, there's a big glut, isn't there? I mean, it's not all going to move immediately when you have all this glut.
They're not going to move without proper oversight as well, because why are they going to trust their £1 billion ships going through potential mines?
If they're going to be attacked.
Not only the lives.
Yes.
Yeah. So we're going to try and find out the real story behind Donald Trump's effusive promises. So we're going to be talking about that. Also, returning to ships as well, we're going to be looking at what happened in the Channel with the Russian ship firing at, or towards, it has to be truthfully said, towards a British yacht. This is in the English Channel. Now, the Ministry of Defence are playing it down, but my specialist, Paul Beaver, said he's never seen anything like this.
Yeah, I spoke to Colonel Richard Kemp earlier on, and he said, like, it's absolutely related to the boarding of the Shadow Fleet. There's just no doubt in his mind about that. I said, let's be cynical, maybe this is a stupid question, but, like, are these things definitely related?
Definitely.
And he says, absolutely, 100%.
Yeah, absolutely, of course it is, and Russia's just playing dumb over this. So, but what does that really mean for the